Hello and welcome to the Daily Atheist Morning Show. It is Wednesday, the 29th of February. Did it again. Wednesday, the 29th of April, and I have got special guest, Deacon James, with me this morning. Good morning, Deacon James. How are you doing?
Good morning. I'm doing well.
Thank you. Thank you for joining me.
Having my morning tea.
Yes. Can you show us the cup real quick? He showed me the cup.
Oh, yeah. I'm a huge Star Wars fan.
There you go. Star Wars fan. So, yeah, that's possibly a concern for a sci-fi Saturday. We may have to have him on and discuss the whole Star Wars, Star Trek,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we have that. You didn't hear the music? There was no music?
I did not hear music.
No, you wouldn't hear music. Kristin with best name ever should have heard the music before the show. Y'all should have heard the music. Anyway, if you didn't, I'll figure that out later. Yeah, I hope you can hear me. Everybody can hear me. Yeah, my little thing says we're talking. So we're good. Good morning, Derek Cruz. How you doing, buddy? Godless Granny. Oh, she says she has a Stormtrooper mug as well. Are you able to see the chat there, brother?
I forgot to put it on, so it's going on right now.
Okay,
there
perfect.
Go.
There you go.
There you go.
So Brainbug is here. Have you ever seen Starship Troopers?
I have not, and I've been needing to see it. And I know it's sort of campy, fun sci-fi.
Yeah.
So 90s especially.
Yes,
so.
It's wonderful. And it's going into it, knowing that, it's just wonderful, right? If you go into it expecting something more serious, you'll be disappointed. But going in expecting campy and fun. And in this thing is just Brainbug. It's this big, huge, it's just a huge bug. And it sucks your brains out. Yeah, it's like the controller of the enemy bugs. Anyway, Brainbug is in the chat this morning. Good morning, Brainbug. Just kind of bringing you up in this feed as to who Brainbug was. Stephanie is here this morning. Good morning, Stephanie. John Anthony is here. John Anthony. Matter of fact, you and John Anthony have been threatening to do a debate, possibly on my show.
Friendly debate, hopefully. Yeah.
Oh, of course. Yes. And so he will be on the show tomorrow.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
I'll be sure to watch then.
And so maybe sometime if you guys want to pick a specific topic, I don't remember, it's been months since you guys started this up in the chat. So, for those of you who don't know, you know what, let me let you introduce yourself and then I'll tell them the story about how I met you. So this is Deacon James. Oh, yeah. Deacon James, good morning.
Yeah. So I'm Deacon James. I am so I grew up as an independent, fundamental King James onlyist sort of Baptist, as think the strictest Baptist you could be, and then go a few steps further. So that's what I grew up as. And when I went to college, I did the sort of typical, and not to belittle, but just the sort of typical like questioning and then like leaving my own faith. And I was an agnostic for a bit, but I started doing a sort of spiritual journey. So at that point, I would have said I'm spiritual, not religious. And I did a bunch of studying of like a variety of religions: Islam, Buddhism, Hinduism, Christianity, of course, Judaism. And I ended up coming back to Christianity, but not as a Baptist anymore. I ended up becoming what's called an Anglican. So think both Catholic and Protestant together. We identify as both. So I went from there to when I first went into college, I was actually looking at going into law. So I wanted to get paid to lie to people, and now I'm wanting to get paid to. I wanted to get paid to tell the truth to people, which you might disagree with that, but now I'm going into ministry, and so I'm a deacon right now, and then I'll be I was supposed to be made a priest this May, but hey, the virus got in the way of that, right. So it's going to be sometime later in the summer. I think we're working through all that right now.
That's one of the things that, I get what you mean about bringing the truth. That's kind of how we all feel. I think.
Yeah.
We all feel the same way. It's just like I said before the show, we're on the other side of the fence. But other than that, one of the things that we've talked about before. All right, now that we've introduced you, though, because I don't want to forget this, I got to tell this story. We've introduced you. Let me tell you folks how I met him. You may remember me talking about Deacon James because I had been dropping some videos. I think if I remember correctly, it was my Evil God Monster of Abraham series. And you were in the chat of my YouTube videos saying that you wanted to debate me about what the topic what the Bible was actually talking about, or my videos or something. And of course, I'm like, I don't know this guy. I don't know you from anybody. And I even told him as much. I come on the channel and I said, this guy wants to debate me. I don't know him, blah, blah, blah. But John Anthony wants to debate him. And so that's kind of got the thing So that's how I met him. He wanted to debate me. And I'm like, you're just trolling my chat. I'm not going to debate you. I didn't know he was a real deacon. I thought it was another one of those Darth Dawkins moments. Have you ever heard of Darth Dawkins?
I've heard of him, and so I have not watched any of. It's a he, right? Yeah, his
I believe
videos.
so. Yeah.
So I don't want to go by what basically third-hand knowledge, but I've not been a fan of what I've heard third-hand knowledge, so I can't conclude anything. But
right. Okay, so this is kind of you'll understand this. We've got Chris, the atheist pastor. He comes on the show. We've got other people who often take on. There's the atheist Christian who comes on the show. So this question that comes from Empathetic Atheist, his name is Justin. He's a fellow content creator. He's asking, are you a theist? Because they may not realize that you're actually, because we've got so many people who take on those kind of the deacon atheist. It wouldn't be a surprise to run into the atheist deacon or something. So he is a real theist, a real believer, a real Catholic, a real Anglican. See, I never really split the hair between what was a Catholic and what was an Anglican. Never really knew. Now I got an idea.
It depends on who you ask. So some people would say Catholic is everyone who's Roman Catholic, who's like under the Pope.
Mm-hmm.
So the argument from Anglicanism is that no, actually you don't have to be under the Pope to be Catholic. So that's just a short aside.
Basically just a heretic that needs to be burned at the stake. I'm just saying.
Oh yeah. Hey, that's everyone is someone else's heretic.
That's exactly right. The old church. That's the old church. We don't do that anymore. Stop that in a few days. Some people say watching Darth is a treat. I tell you, when he comes in, he's just a disturbance. His whole deal is destroying atheists in debates and stuff like that. Or that's his goal or his shtick. I've never seen.
Oh, he's a theist?
Yes. Darth Dawkins is a theist. And what he'll do is he'll come into the chat and he'll try to take over the show from the chat where we're all talking about him and engaging him instead of talking to my guest or something. The reason why I thought you might have heard of him is because for those of you who don't know, Deacon James has his own YouTube channel and he has his own live stream that he does almost on a daily basis. Am I right? Is it fairly daily?
As much as possible. Yeah. It's a morning prayer. So it's different from what people typically understand prayer to be, where it's just a sort of thing that you just sort of like a conversation with God is how it's understood usually.
Mm-hmm.
Traditionally and historically, prayer has been, it is involved with that idea of conversation with God. Right. But it is also strongly the sort of recitation of prayers and canticles and verses and just sort of it's a formative thing. So
gotcha. Well, there's a lot of interest going on because again, like I told you before the show, you're my first Christian, and now you're just a full-blown Catholic deacon. Not to just have a normal Christian, but a Catholic deacon. And one of the things that so I can explain this to you, and most of my people already know this. I'm not actually against all religious people or spirituality or no. I am specifically against the harm done by religion. I have no problem with Deacon James and his belief and what he does and the dance he dances and the song he sings. I have no problem with those things. When Deacon James starts telling other people not to give their child medicine instead of sending them to the doctor and to rub oil on their head instead of giving them actual medical treatment, then I will have a problem. That's what I'm against. I'm against people using their faith to harm. And as far as I know, Deacon James doesn't do any of that. He's just
thank you. Yes.
A normal. Yeah. There's this idea of what a priest or a preacher or a pastor or whatever is supposed to be. There's also a bad tarnished view of what many of them actually are from our perspective. But we have to remember that there are people out there who are actually trying to live up to the call of Christianity in the ways that even us atheists would see as good. And therefore, I don't have a problem with those people. And as far as I know, like I said, I met Deacon on the thing. He wanted to debate me. I don't know what it was about. I had no idea who the guy was. He did friend me on Facebook, and I was like, I don't know if I should do this, but I accepted it. And so we've for a few months now. He's been on Facebook. I've seen his prayers. I've watched some of his videos. He's all right. He's on the other side of the fence. He bats for the other team. I get that, But when he came on the stream this morning, knives didn't come out. It wasn't one of those kind of things. So as y'all like the empathetic atheist, he says he appreciates that you come here with us and interacts with us godless heathens. That's cool.
Well, you're welcome.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. I'll put a prayer for y'all too. How's that?
There you go. Well, you'd be amazed at how an atheist takes that. Oftentimes, though, we know how you mean it. Whenever a Christian says we'll pray for you, it's often meant as a jab.
Yeah, I will say this. So during my undergrad, I was in the philosophy department, and the philosophy department was full of atheists and agnostics. And I was one of maybe 3 theists and one of 2 Christians, I think, in the entire department.
Really?
So yeah. I interacted with atheists and agnostics a lot, of all sorts. So you've got your classical atheists and then your new atheists. I don't know how comfortable you are with that sort of title.
No, I get
like
it.
that.
I get it. Yeah.
Yeah. Like there is a distinction. You have to note that a distinction between like Dawkins and the 4 horsemen types prior to that, others, AJ Ayer and others like that. So
yeah, it's development. It's developed.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah. So like I've had the whole gamut of atheists and agnostics that I've spoken with, and the agnostic atheists, the Gnostic atheists, etc., all that sort of stuff.
Gotcha.
So I'm empathetic with it.
Yeah.
And,
well, you as an agnostic yourself for a while, kind of get it. You get.
Yeah, I was myself.
If nothing else. Yeah.
Yeah. Although I will say, and this is not to sort of degrade anyone, but for me, I could never make that step to atheism as much as I in many cases wanted to. It just, for me, it just didn't make sense to be whether now back then I couldn't find any. I found the arguments for the whole lack of belief thing to be a bit problematic. But so if I was going to be an atheist, it would be because I believe that there is no God, kind of thing. So that might have been why. But yeah, it was always agnostic for me.
That's wonderful that you mentioned that. The whole agnostic atheist thing, when I first started my channel a year ago, that's kind of what I bumped into. I popped into some live streams, and the first thing I encountered was a couple of atheists fighting over what's an atheist. Well, I apologize if they're watching, because one of them was an atheist, but not an atheist. He's actually an agnostic, and he says that you can't be I don't remember. But in my mind, there was atheists we were eating each other rather than addressing the real issues that needed to be addressed. So, new atheist, old atheist, agnostic. I refer to myself as an agnostic atheist for now, because I can't actually say I know there is no God. What I can say is I know based on what I've been told by this, that the notion of that doesn't fit this, and I don't believe X, Y, and Z. But some people get so wrapped up on it that they're actually going to fight about those things. You and I we could agree and probably even work together to address those things, like I mentioned earlier, people who are misguided in their faith. Let's put it that way, rather than me just calling them nutbags. Misguided in their faith, and they use it to harm other people. We could work, you and I, or people of our like mind, could work together to address those things and educate them and save people, or we could argue about what's an agnostic. Just it's kind of the same thing. I thought that was not worth arguing over. What's so somebody comes at me and, well, you're not an atheist because this. All right, fine. That's fine. You're right. But I will say I have said on the show that the Daily Agnostic is just not as catchy. Just doesn't ring,
Actually, I like it. Actually, that's an important point. I want to say something with that in a second, but
okay.
I will say it is interesting that atheism, agnosticism has its own sort of denominational rifts, as you can see.
Absolutely, yes, absolutely.
Yeah,
but it's amazing the human capacity for disagreement.
Have you seen that South Park episode, Go God Go, or that? I think it's a 3-set episode.
No. I'm sorry. It's just funny that a deacon is wanting. You've seen more South Park than I have. I've seen like 2 episodes though. Go ahead.
Yeah. It's not a show I'm necessarily promoting, but
right. Carry on, yeah.
However, that 3-part episode is raunchy but hilarious, and in it, Cartman goes to the future because he wants to get the Wii. So he accidentally goes too far into the future where the world is run by atheists, and the atheists are debating like the most minutest of things. And it's sort of a play on the idea of like, oh, if there was no religion, there'd be no war and all that sort of stuff. It's like, come on. It's not because of religion that we're having wars. It's because we're humans, that we're having wars.
That's a good right. We're humans, and religion is a damn good excuse.
Sure.
Religion,
as many others.
Yeah. It's just one of many reasons. Of course, we could go throughout, but it's almost, in my opinion, it's almost always, even when it's religion. I mean, we've watched one faith war against themselves, Catholic and Protestants, and how much, like 5 million French people died just after during the Protestant, you know what I mean? I mean, all these,
I don't know. Yeah, but yeah.
And they all believe, so it's the differences. They were worth, I don't know why they were worth killing each other over, but I'm glad.
By the way, using my magic deacon powers, I changed my mug to a Dracula one now.
There you go. Whoops. See, we're gonna have him on sci-fi. So we'll get a vote. I'm sure people will be going sci-fi Saturday. And, thankfully though, nobody in the chat has called for you to be nailed or hung or strung up or anything like that. They've been really nice so far. That's
instant heaven points for me. Please, please, please martyr me.
Well, that's funny you say that. When I first started, I wrote a book back in 2013. I used a pseudonym to write the book because there were these atheist writers, bloggers getting murdered over in Indonesia and stuff, and you never know when it's going to move over here. Yeah. And I used to say something kind of similar. It's not necessarily martyrdom. It's just that part of my deal is talking about how dangerous and violent religion can be. And religious people can be. And if you murder me, you prove me right. Everything I've said, you prove me right. You vindicate what I've said. So it's kind of the same, I don't really worry about Catholic priests murdering me, but there was the big Islam thing. That used to be my worry. I used to really address Islam, and then I moved, that was different. Now politics is the big threat. Everybody.
Politics. Yeah. No, back to what I wanted to say before. It's an incredibly important point to make. So I'm really a little bit disappointed in you, Chris.
Okay. All right. No, cool. Me too.
So your show is called the Daily Atheist Morning Show, the DAM show.
The damn show.
Yeah. And the damn show. And you're trying to be edgy, but you just need to add another letter, N. So if you put the Daily Atheist Morning News Show, and you have like a little news segment, you're just you'll get even more damnation for
my buck. That's right. The damn show. I'll tell you how that came about. TubeBuddy limits you or suggests you keep your title under 70 characters. And when I was doing it at first, I was like, this guy and this guy are going to be on the Daily Atheist Morning Show. And I'm like, oh man, I got to cut that back. So I cut it back to damn. And I was like, oh, look at that. I wish I'd have done it on purpose. The Daily Atheist Morning News. Yeah, I like that. Damnable. Yeah. So again, for those of you who don't know or who've shown up, hi Paul. Paul is here. John Anthony. I already said hi to John. I'm saying hi again, John. Ilya Moon. Good morning, Ilya Moon. Nice to see you. We got a Christian on the show over here. This guy over here. It's unusual but fun. He's not that bad. I have not burst into flames, although the show is got flames going on.
I've been trying to burst you into flames. It's just not been working.
That's what those prayers
I'm trying to cast fireball. I
thought I felt this tingling sensation. There's always that. And on top of all this stuff. All right. So again, we often have predetermined notions about what other people are. I see some priests in movies and I'm like, hey, that priest was pretty cool. He was drinking and doing all this stuff. But whatever you think about a real priest, you don't really, so we have these predetermined notions of what people are. And then to meet somebody and go, you know what? There's an actual person. Yeah. Somebody who's cool. This guy, not only is he a deacon, Dancy was a deacon, every Sunday found him. You didn't know I sang on the show. Anyway, so not only is he a deacon, the guy likes Star Wars. He's got a great sense of humor. He does live streams and he does his own creative content. Of course, I don't promote his crap because it's nutbaggery, right? Am I right or am I right? But you know what I mean? He's, as far as content creators, that's one of the things. He's a fellow content creator. I'm watching his shows. I'm like, hey, if you do this and you do this, this will increase the production. I didn't actually say those things. I've never said them to him. I think them as I'm watching your show. As a fellow content creator, I'm going, this guy needs, or I could provide some assistance or help to this guy. I have no problem because we're on the same path as content creators.
Well, I appreciate any help if you want to give it,
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. It's kind of course, there again, spreading our nutbaggery. I even call it, if you've ever heard me refer to craziness or you're crazy, what you as a nutbag or me as a nutbag, it's kind of a perspective thing. Like you said earlier, we're actually all crazy. We're all from different perspectives. So you've got your nutbaggery. I've got my nutbaggery. I'm crazy looking at it from that guy over there. Again, my big deal is about the harm of society. Right now, we could go, as far as the debate thing, there's a religion and politics that have kind of married themselves from an atheist standpoint, which we feel are bad. And they're making things worse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'll say this. So I'm pretty conservative, but I'm also libertarian. So, okay. So I'm the conservative libertarian, the downright more. So for instance, I am personally opposed to gay marriage. However, I don't want the state telling people those sorts of things.
Right.
Right.
Of course.
And I also don't want the state telling churches what they have to do and what they have to recognize.
Right.
So I don't want the state to say, oh, well, you have to baptize, this sort of way and do this sort of stuff. Likewise, I don't want them telling me how to consider a marriage,
Right.
And I hate the line, I have gay friends kind of thing, but like my point in saying I have gay friends is that to show I'm not someone who's hostile towards LGBTQ people.
Right.
So I think that there's sort of two divides where it's like, well, you either are fully in support of all sorts of actions like that, or you just hate gay people. And I'm like, no, I don't want the government telling people what to do.
Right.
But also I have personal opinions about this, and they are reflected because of my religious positions. So,
well, it would be unfair of us to bring you on the show and then expect you to share the same values as the people, but it is interesting the way you put it. Cause I absolutely agree with that. Of course, I have no problem with homosexualities or their notions, but it does make sense. You're a Catholic deacon. It makes sense that you would actually it's technically one of the things you'd be against X, Y, and Z of something, that you're not against people. It's just against the marriage in the eyes of the law kind of thing. I can get that. That would actually have to be one of your default standpoints, wouldn't it?
Well, it's not even against the idea of marriage in the eyes of the law. Like I said, if the state wants to allow legally for gay marriage, I could not care less.
Okay.
That's not my position.
Oh, you're talking about like a gay wedding in the church. That's what you're talking about.
Well, so within the traditional Christian understanding,
of course, yes,
you have the law of like marriage being a legal binding thing, and then you have the law as what's called a sacrament, or the marriage is what's called a sacrament. So the sacramental part is the church's part. So what we're saying is, I don't care, like, this is not a Christian nation, and all that sort of stuff. This is a nation that has a multiplicity of religions. So the state, I don't care what they do. Just do not tell us what to do with the sacrament part,
right?
Because that is our part. Don't impose here, and we won't impose there. So.
That's interesting. Yeah, I appreciate that view. Part of the deal, again, we can't, from our perspective, expect X, Y, and Z from you, but I do appreciate those views on your part, because you could be a lot harder on that. I don't really know a lot of Darth Dawkins things, but he's the only other Christian, outside of Richard Madsen that I mentioned before that I've engaged. I haven't even engaged him. So to be honest, I'm a little out of whack as to, I sing to the choir. I don't generally go out and debate or argue people. So I'm a little out of perspective whenever it comes to how Christians feel about it. And what I'm trying to say is I appreciate where you're coming from, and that you have those values. I expected something else.
Oh, well, thank you.
Yeah. Because again, people can be ugly. Religion can be, and I'm not saying Catholicism specifically, but Catholicism specifically, it doesn't matter, right? Religion can be used as a tool for ugliness. There's this saying we have in our community, atheist communities, a good person does good things, a bad person does bad things. But if you want a good person to do bad things, give them a religion. I'm paraphrasing there. There's a better way. So I just see it's good, or feel that it's good, And maybe that's wrong of me. I don't know that we agree on those
I mean,
things, you know?
yeah. Well, I would disagree on the idea, like, if you want a good person to do bad things, give them religion. I would say if you want a good person to do bad things, give them bad ideas. That's what I would say.
Well, that's I guess that could be a good point. But
Uh-huh.
if you were to like just write off bad ideas and take like the body count of just well, I don't know. You can't you there's so many stupid people out there. You know that there's George Carlin used to say, you know, how's it go? Oh man. The average person is pretty dumb, and just know that half of them are below that, you know? I don't know. I'm screwing everything up today.
No,
You know what I mean?
so
though, right?
like, yeah. So a little background for me. My mom is 100% Cuban,
Mhm.
and my dad is a European mutt, but mostly Polish. So on both sides of my family, we have communism, which is considered atheist, and it cracked down on religion, on Christianity especially.
Mhm.
So,
Communist, yeah.
so our background is like, whenever I hear people talk about like, oh, well, religion's done all this bad stuff, I'm like, oh, the 20th century, uh, excuse me, communism, yeah, you know,
Yeah.
and I don't, and my point, like, I don't want to say that atheism is responsible for that.
Oh no,
I would
yeah.
never say that. Yeah. So just to clarify, I'm saying that it is an example of a non-religious thing that has killed up to 100 million people in the 20th century.
Depending on
You know?
how the numbers and how you look at it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Those are kind of tough, really. Especially
Mhm.
whenever people consider like Pol Pot. Pol Pot killed 2 or 3 million of his own people, and he was allegedly an atheist, but he didn't do
Mhm.
it in the name of atheism.
No, yeah, no, of
Stalin,
course not. Yeah.
they may have killed Christians, but they didn't do it again in the name of atheism. Stalin was semi-deified. It was
Mhm.
There was a threat or some kind of threat. Of
Yeah.
course, I remember as a kid, I was a Christian, and I saw videos of Russians burning Bibles, stacking them up, burning Bibles, and
Mhm.
Russians running through churches with their tanks. I remember seeing that as a kid back in the
Oh
80s
wow.
and stuff like that. I don't know if they were actual from the time videos that this was happening
Uh,
now on the news kind of thing, or if it was this
uh,
is a history of. But yeah, it's certainly true. But then again, they
mhm.
also starved like 20 million of their own people.
Yeah.
Just for X, Y, and Z. To be honest, I'm forgetting the reasons. Um, it's like they didn't have, I don't know. They did a lot of bad things. They just didn't do them in the name of atheism. However, if we were to start with the Crusade,
Mhm.
First Crusade, and then work our way through the, what, 9, 10, what Crusade are we on now? Because I personally
Oh, now
feel,
I so officially there are four crusades,
right,
but
okay,
there are as many as eight.
right, right.
So the fourth crusade. So I love the history of the crusades because it's just and this is not to make light of the deaths, but this is just a lot of it's
No, we
very
all do it,
comical.
right? Yeah, we all do it. We all do it.
A lot of it's very comical. So I will say that in defense of the crusades, as much as one can defend it, there is actually, like, Islam sort of was persecuting the Eastern Christians, the what are known as the Eastern Orthodox today.
Mhm.
So part of it was to liberate the Christians who were being persecuted by the Muslims. Now, then there are excesses with it and all that sort of stuff, and it goes
Oh
from
yeah.
the first crusade being more or less noble-ish, to the fourth crusade where they're literally attacking a Christian city and taking over a Christian city because the Christian city is not helping them with supplies.
Oh
And
really?
so they went to in the fourth crusade they went to free Jerusalem from the Muslims,
Mhm.
and they went to Constantinople, which is a Christian city. And they're like, "Oh, we want supplies. We need this help." And they're like, "No, I don't remember the exact details of why they didn't help,
Mhm.
but or no, they didn't even ask for help. What happened was they were low on supplies before they even got to Jerusalem. So they stopped by at Constantinople, sacked and took over Constantinople, which is a Christian city,
For
and they're like, "Oh,
supplies.
we're just gonna take this over now."
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah.
We need this
And
stuff.
yeah. So for me, the idea is that uh, religion does good and does bad,
Mhm.
and it just is a tool. It is
Yeah.
a tool for what is in the innermost hearts of men and women. So.
Well, yeah, that's true. Religion is a tool for that. Religion is also a tool to control the uneducated, the fear, the people who with fear. There's a lot of fear-driven people. A lot of people use religion to drive people using fear. One of the things that's big in the atheist community, and this is something you're probably very much against, is we see the indoctrination of children as harmful. Many of us believe children should not receive any religious training or nothing like that until they're at least 18. So their mind is, they teach them all these things because there's this fear of hell that's always used against children, fear of Satan and hell, and you're going to go to hell and you're going to burn forever. And a lot of us, including myself, have our own little horror stories that we can tell you about times as children where we cowered in fear alone in our beds at night, thinking Satan was going to pop up out of the floor and drag us to hell. That's child abuse, man. You know what I mean?
I 100% grew up with that.
yeah. So you feel my pain.
Yeah.
Well, that was one of the funny things. Why would somebody go to Catholicism from one of these others? And then you told me how strict the others were, and I was like, wow, Catholicism must be a fresh breath of air.
Well, I want to make a point of clarification. So as it's again, just for people who are coming in now, I'm not a Roman Catholic. So I'm not under the papacy. So I'm what's called an Anglo-Catholic.
Oh, wait, somebody asked you a question. Go ahead. While I explain, I'll find this question. Go ahead.
Yeah. So as an Anglo-Catholic, I'm within the Anglican tradition, and I'm not under the papacy. So we don't hold to things like the Immaculate Conception as what's called de fide. We don't hold to the papacy. We look to the Bishop of Rome as just like he's the bishop in charge of Rome, and people look to him, but he is not our bishop. He is not our patriarch.
Okay.
Yeah.
Who is?
We don't have. So the closest thing we would have to a patriarch would be the Archbishop of Canterbury, and his name is Justin Welby. Okay. And I'm not a big fan of him because he's just for a variety of reasons. The last Archbishop of Canterbury, Rowan Williams, is a huge hero of mine. He actually did a debate/discussion with Richard Dawkins, one or two. I think he did two, but I know he did at least one. And it's very different from sort of like your average atheist debate. It's the sort of thing that I look up to as like a standard for debate. He's just an incredibly intelligent, very wise man. Think of it like,
what was his name?
Rowan Williams, Rowan.
Yeah.
Okay, he's amazing. Think of it like if Richard Dawkins was going to talk to Gandalf. It's just like that's saying that there is no Iluvatar. Rowan Williams, yeah.
Williams, okay. All right, so here was the question from the chat. It's if your religion is informing your opinion against same-sex marriage, how is that okay? The opinion is harmful to people.
So that is actually a really, really good question. I like that. Yeah. So my religion informs me of certain things. And so my position is a result of that. However, it comes from the presumption that the religion is true, obviously. Yeah. So like if it's true, then it follows from it. So the question of harm, though, I think, so I have a professor at my seminary who's what is known as a celibate gay man. He is only same-sex attracted, and he also is does not engage in sexual intimacy outside of the bonds of marriage.
Okay.
So he's got a book called Spiritual Friendship that sort of talks about this, and he has another one called Washed and Waiting that gives like sort of a full detail from the perspective of a gay man who is celibate. So when it comes to the question of harm, my position is this: is that the sex itself is very powerful. So we have to have a mature and tempered understanding of how it should be enacted. Now, this is not I always want to stress, this is not me wanting to make a legal declaration about this.
Oh, right.
I don't want the government telling you who you can and can't sleep with, outside of like obviously consent and age and all that. Like,
of course,
put that all aside, But I mean, in fact, think about it. The reason why consent is such a powerful thing is that the act of sex is powerful. Like, we don't have laws of like, if someone says, oh, they punched me in the shoulder, you could do legal action in response to that, but that's not something as grave and as serious as sexual harassment, for instance.
Right.
You see the difference, yeah?
Oh yeah.
And the reason for that is because sex is a very powerful thing. It is the most intimate thing that people can do with each other. So within the Christian, or I'll say the Abrahamic tradition, at least, because conservative Judaism or traditional Judaism and traditional Islam would agree with us more or less on these points.
Right.
The point of sex, biologically, is procreation. Right. So we look at sex as being an act that is geared towards procreation. Yes. Excuse me. All right. So because of that, when we look at sexual acts outside of the bond of marriage, and the point of marriage is to have a man and woman united so that they can procreate and so that they can give a stable family community to the children that they procreate so that the species of human can be furthered.
Okay.
The acts outside of that, what happens is they don't have the sacrificial part of the procreation, which, making kids is a very tough thing. Mm-hmm. Having kids is it takes away from your life. You don't get to do whatever you want to do, sort of thing. So what happens is when sex becomes only for the unitive part, for the pleasure, then what happens is there's a sort of eating, and it becomes a lust itself. So I would say this for all sexual relations outside of marriage, even if it's one guy and one girl, or a continual sexual relations that are not wanting children at all, that are actively, constantly trying to avoid having children. That's not to say that artificial contraception is always bad, but it is to say that this idea that, oh, I just never want children and I just want to have the sex, like that forms you into a person who is just looking at sex as a pleasure-seeking thing.
Right.
So that's how it would take so long to sort of tease all this out into totally. No pun intended, tease.
Well, they're asking questions in the chat, but there's something going on, and I just kind of want to briefly. This is difficult for me because I'm new as an interviewer, and I'm also a very passionate atheist. What's going on, folks, is that I'm trying to let him explain his position. I'm not engaging him on those things because he's not defending those positions. He's explaining those positions. He's telling me a story. And if I stop him at every time and go, but wait a second, if you do this with gay stuff, well, that's not what he's doing. He's not here or he's not actually trying to debate right now. He's just laying out as to why they believe that, and now
that's an important thing to thank you.
Yeah. Now that he's through all those things, we could have the conversations. There's been questions. Naturally, that especially one of our things is that sex is not just about procreation. We kind of get that.
I agree. I
agree. Yes. Yeah. We know all those things. You were just explaining the position of your part of the church and how you understand it. I totally get that. I appreciate that. Thank you. Real quick, someone, my brain bug, asked about the atheism. It flew by. I got a lot of chat going on. It flew by. But the communism and neither we both understand that Deacon James and I both understand that communism and atheism are not the same. And as John Anthony he did a good job of explaining, we were really kind of talking about a specific era where one large group of people happened to have the same thing. They were atheists and they were communist. That's all we were talking about. Deacon does not, I don't think you think that atheists and communists are the same.
No.
Right. But matter of fact, though, I even remember a time in my youth when I didn't believe they were the same, but I thought they were lined up. Now I know it's not. They're no more. Communism and atheism don't have any. It's not related. not because of those things. That they had their reasons for being their way, but we're not that way. They're not related. So there was that. Okay. So, and this is one of those questions. I'm going to ask it now that you're done explaining, because it's kind of addressing your deal, but. How do you deny the proven fact that two adults of the same sex can have healthy relationships and healthy families? Now, before you before you go on, I just want to state again that that's not the position you took. You never said that. You never said you believed that. Matter of fact, I think you almost said to the contrary. What your whole bag is about, in the eyes of the Lord, marriage, how your church works. You don't want the outside government telling you what to do. That was all, I think. Am I right?
Yeah. So yeah, and I'm actually really thankful that that question was brought up. So because it's something I do want to talk about. So back to that book, my professor, his name is Wes Hill, by the way. Okay. His book is called Washed in Wait. Well, two books, Washed in Waiting, and then there is also what's the other one called? Spiritual Friendship. So one of the problems that happens, especially sort of in evangelical Christianity, the sort of typical what you think of when you think of Christianity in the U.S. That's evangelical Christianity, is that there's a rejection of the actual sexual intercourse happening within LGBTQ relations, but because of that actual rejection, which I would also reject, I would reject those sexual relations. Therefore, the whole package is bad.
Okay, I see. Yeah, because somebody mentioned that you did say that.
Yeah, I want to distinguish between that. I don't want to say that because the sexual relations are bad, therefore, the entire relationship is bad. So what people like Wessel and others are saying is like, no, you can have loving relationships that are not sexual. So for instance, and I hesitate to bring this sort of example up because I don't want to say they're the same exact thing, but I'm just giving an example of how you can love someone with, I'll put it this way. You can love someone and not have sex with them.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I totally, Holly Berry. I love her, but I can't have sex with her.
No, but yeah. So
sorry.
So what I see within what's really weird. So I my home state is Tennessee. I'm currently in Pennsylvania for seminary, but my home state is Tennessee. And you would think otherwise, but in Nashville, there's a huge LGBTQ sort of culture there, like relatively huge. And so like I witnessed a lot of people who actually do care for and love each other, and I would never deny that. The problem I would say would be the actual sexual intercourse part, and that would be going back to my religion, my understanding of sex, and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, I don't ever want to say that. Back to what I was going to say. So with sort of what I see with like the two sides, the LGBTQ side and the evangelical side, is there's this idea that you can't have a loving relationship unless you have sex, more or less, and that is not a fair assessment of both sides because there's obviously differentiation, but oftentimes like you see significant portions in both sides who would say something more or less like that.
Right. But the LGBTQ part, I mean, their entire deal is about sex. That's what it's all about. I mean, the whole thing is how sex, their sexuality, their attraction, their genitalia all separates them from the what we would consider the normal, or what.
Yeah, and I would say that
bad. Yeah,
I would say that defining of oneself that way, I think is problematic. So that would be an issue that I would have a problem with. So I know plenty of Christians who so my one of my closest friends is actually another celibate gay man. And he never identified ever as LGBTQ because he hated the idea that he would identify as his sexual desires. Like, he's like, no, I'm a Christian. Like, that's what is most important to me, not who I want to sleep with, kind of thing. Right. And if you want to define yourself by that for a variety of reasons, then that's up to you. But like that's the sort of outsider problem that some people have. I think you kind of shared that with what you were saying, right?
Yeah.
Were you seeing like that as a problem of just identifying with how your sexual activity goes?
Yeah. Well, you mentioned that it's like both sides were talking about how, you can have love without sex. So it's like and if I misunderstood, it's like the Christian side is going, hey, gay people, here's an example. We've got a gay person over here. He doesn't have sex. You can be gay and not have sex. Why do you have to have sex? But my point was that the whole LGBTQ part of that deal is all about sex. That's literally what each one of those titles is about. So to say, hey, you people whose entire movement is about what you do with your private parts, that's the entirety of your scope. Don't think about that. Just put that aside. That's
oh, no, I wouldn't say don't think about it.
Yeah. No. I'm not saying you said that. I'm saying whenever you say that there's sex with no love or love with no sex, you know, oh, you love them without having sex with them. Fuck that. Not funny. That was funny in my head. So that's kind of thing. Let me try to catch up with some of the questions. One of the things is you can ask these folks. I can get very contrary on the show. My arms get to flailing and I get direct. But one of the things about having Deacon James on the show was not to attack him. That was part of the deal. We're just going to have a fun morning show kind of thing. So there are questions that are coming from the chat that may seem like attacks, and they probably are. But it's kind of one of the things is to be honest, I'm a little kind of, I'm trying to be a good interviewer and not be a jerk. So I'm not asking. Oh,
you've been fine.
Right. Because I'm not asking hard questions. I'm not going, well, how come of this? And how come of this? I'm trying very hard not to be contrary. Fortunately, my chat is not. So I'm going to Kristin.
I have no problem.
Okay.
I have no problem with being contrary. Being contrary. And I will say this, if you don't mind.
Okay.
For me, I love tough questions because it forces me to think through those things.
Okay.
So these are issues that I've had to deal with my own self. You know, being in the Middle Tennessee area, there, like I said, there was a time where literally I was the only straight man in my apartment. Like everyone else was one of the LGBTQ. So like I've had to deal with these sort of issues continually, and other issues. You know, but we could run the whole gamut. So
we'll start with this.
that I've not dealt. Oh, go ahead. Sorry. Yeah.
No, we'll start with these. I mean, yeah. Well, so let me get back to some of these, because part of the problem, I believe, is that there's this fuzzy line between you don't agree with them, but you do agree with them, or you don't want to the gay people.
Oh, okay.
You know, the gay people. It's like I don't understand. One minute it feels like you're kind of okay with them, they're cool, do what they want to do, and then the next minute you're like, I don't agree with that, and I don't think that is right. At what
No, okay, yeah. So I should definitely clarify that then. So
yeah,
I
please.
think that it is. Yeah. So I think homosexuality is a sin. Like I'll say it that way.
Okay.
And I'm being blunt, so people don't question otherwise. You know?
Understood. All right, it's a sin. That's given.
Yeah. So it is a sin, just like any sort of sex outside of marriage is a sin.
Okay.
So, so there's that. However, at the same time, I do not want to make that a legal declaration.
Right.
Okay. So in the sense of legal, if you are not a Christian, and if you are, if you're not a Christian, like that is your world. That's your worldview. That's your system. I'm not going to say, go do it, but I'm going to say like, I'm not an authority over you,
Right.
So just like another nation, I'm not going to tell France how to run their things. I'm not going to tell a non-Christian how to live their lives. Right. And so as someone who is a minister who will be over a church, those are people who have decided to place themselves under my authority. I graduate this May, and I will be in a church actually in California as an associate priest. So those people have decided we are Christians and we are going to be under these rules and we are going to live our lives this way. So because of that, I can say, okay, this is a sin. Don't do this.
Right.
However, you're not a Christian and you're not under my church. I'm not going to tell you how to live your life.
But you still consider it a sin. I mean, that's to be expected. These things are to be expected. It's just that's why. I mean, a lot of it I'm not really surprised by. Let's see what. So, can you ask him?
If I can make a just real quick addendum to that, it is interesting. Like, no one should be like freaked out that I consider it a sin.
No,
as long as I make that distinction between law and my faith, because I'm not trying to enforce, say, we need to, make a constitutional, marriage between only male and female amendment kind of thing, because that's the state, and I don't want to enforce the state's power with faith. So Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Yeah, I'm trying to catch up here. I get what you're saying. I believe I get what you're saying. One of the
Mhm.
things though is, I mean, for those in the chat, this guy is a real Catholic deacon. I mean, we are Anglican. We should expect
Anglo-Catholic.
this. And there you go. However I say it, we should expect these things from him. It would be, I mean, we can challenge him on that, and that's wonderful. Yeah. It's because some of the things, it seems like sexism or oppression of other people, and it's hard to get around that. Whenever it's not you personally doing it, it's people who believe aligned with the way you believe tend to extend that to oppressing other people. The question was asked, and this is a scare. I mean, and hi, Iron Charioteer, nice to have you. And Utah Outcast. I've never seen Utah Outcast in my chat before that I know of. So,
I don't know who that
beautiful. Yeah, well, they're another atheist group. Wonderful to have you. So this is my first Christian. I'm not used to interviewing Christians. I'm trying to be a good guest and not be offensive. It's not working. Well, actually, I'm doing pretty good.
That's fine.
Can you ask him what's sinful about two married homosexual people having sex? Is there a specific thing about homosexuality? And can you extend? Oftentimes, the males and females are treated differently in the Bible. In the Bible, it says a man shall not lay with another man. Does it say anything in the Bible about a woman not laying with another woman?
Yeah. Romans chapter 1.
Okay.
Yeah.
I never thought that.
So
for later study.
Yeah. So Romans chapter 1, I think the verses are like 25 through 28 or something like that. It talks about both men and women, each, as exclusively man and woman. So the point is, I think if you narrow it down to homosexuality, where two men or two women, the problem is that even biologically, it is not possible to procreate from it. And for us, the idea of sex is a both unitive, so like the sexual union itself, which is also pleasurable, and procreative. So what we're saying is that those two things should be there within sexual intercourse, and then within the stable commitment of a marriage. So the problem then would be, because the sexual unity is like biologically not possible with two men and two women.
That's true. Let me ask you then, if you have a man who has been rendered sterile or a woman who has been rendered sterile, by that notion, are they no longer worthy of being married, or should they not have sex anymore by that notion? I'm not asking for your specific opinion on it. Well, I mean, if you want to, you can give me your specific opinion on it. And if not, why not?
So yeah, we would consider it, now there might be reasons for sterility, because of like, surgery and all that. We're not talking about those sorts of things. We're talking about like an intention to sterilize because I don't want kids, not for health reasons. I don't want kids, kind of thing. Right. We would find that a problem. So we would not condone that sort of action.
Right. So a man who has a vasectomy in order to avoid having children should stop having sex. Am I understanding that right?
I'd have to think about, so I'd have to
angle
more. Yeah. I'd have to consider more of what to say. So there might be different answers depending on the pastoral concern. So again, it depends on why they got the vasectomy.
Right.
And then it depends on, well, I got the vasectomy 5 years ago. I've changed my mind, and I've been, I realized that thing was wrong to do. Therefore, but I don't have the money, for instance, to fix it or whatever kind of thing. So you have to take all those questions into account.
Oh yeah.
So you can't give a one answer all, and that's the pastoral duty. So as a priest, I have to deal with that situation itself.
Thank you for
this is
splitting
my wisdom on that. Yeah.
Thank you for splitting that. Yeah. Great. Okay. Yeah. So that kind of, we've got two different points here, and it's a matter of a blurred line, I feel, and that's it. In statement A, sex is a biological feature that is designed to procreate and have children. If you're not doing that for that purpose, you should not be having sex. A man who accidentally lost his ability to have children, bucking a horse and he wrecked his nuts and he can't have children. By that notion, he cannot have children. He should never have sex again because he would always be having it out of pleasure. And that's
so the unitive. Okay. So the unitive part is the thing. Okay. So in the A one, we're talking about procreation as one half of the reason. So the unitive part is the other reason. So the sexual pleasure is a part that's with it. So there's that. Now, also, if you look in the Bible, and we take the Bible obviously as being true, you see time after time these stories within Scripture, and it's so funny because I actually just did a paper on this last week. You see times in Scripture like Abraham and Sarah, they could not have kids, and they finally had a child in their old age. Elizabeth and I can't remember her husband's name, Zechariah, Hannah and her husband, they were not able to have kids, and then finally God blessed them with a child. So you might not take obviously those as real stories, but we do.
Right.
So we see this idea that even in the midst of infertility, God can bless you with children. And then as a real world example, I know a priest and his wife within the Anglican tradition where priests are allowed to be married. So a priest and his wife, they were trying, and multiple doctors said they could not have children. And they kept trying. So they're like, okay, we're just going to adopt. So they adopted 2 kids. And then finally God blessed them with a child, like a child from the wife got pregnant. So, and like, that's just one example. I know quite a few others, but that is a priest I know personally. So,
God.
So like go ahead. Sorry.
Well, no, go ahead. Finish your thought.
Yeah. So like the idea is that, even with those seemingly hopeless ideas, God can still bless you with children. And so the intention to have children is still there. So the reason the intention is so important is the mindset. Because if I'm not married, but if I'm going to have sex with my wife and my constant idea is I don't want to procreate with her, I just want to have sex for pleasure, like that forms my mind, especially if I'm not careful, into thinking of her as just a sexual object for me to have pleasure from.
Right. I see. That's one of the things that we've been trying to get. Now, Chris, the atheist pastor, we mentioned him earlier. He's in the chat and he thinks I should be going way much harder on you. Chris, you're welcome to have Deacon on your show and debate him. My purpose was actually to have a lighthearted morning show and not intentionally debate or be a jerk to this guy. Because that's what I'm normally about. That's even what I extended to Darth Dawkins. I'm like, listen, dude, if you want to come on my show and have a lighthearted morning show, that's fine. We've slipped into this. We keep pulling into this because the reason why we're pulling into sexuality a lot and the homosexuality.
The puns are horrible.
It's because I didn't even see it. I missed it. Slipped me. Anyway, it's the reason why we keep coming to that is to the chat is wanting me to engage him more than I had planned on engaging him. I didn't plan on this being a debate. He is actually explaining the tenets or beliefs of his particular branch of the church, not necessarily whether he believes these oppressive things, some of these oppressive things should be done on people. That's kind of the difference. And I intentionally did not invite him here to argue and debate with him. I'm listening to him tell his thing. I'm not attacking him on each point as he goes through it. Chris said I should shut this down. Shut down what? You're just telling me what your deal is. Now, these people are asking questions, and we, as a group, disagree with you on many of these things. But guys, friends, that was to be expected. The guy is a deacon. He's a deacon. This is a Christian on our channel. We should expect him to believe in God. We could argue with him about it, but that's not really what I invited him for here to do. Really, so see, that's what I'm saying. Chris says, the atheist pastor says, the reason the chat is saying that is because what you're saying is homophobic. Yeah. By our standards, it is. But it's, how do I explain this? It's how I feel about it. I didn't bring you on, and I told you this before the show, to pounce on you. That's not what we brought you here for. I didn't bring you here to convert you. Now, if you want to, we can go down that road. We can start. You want to talk about Abram? It was actually Abram and Sarai. Listen, God did not bless Sarai with the child, even though Abram was. Yet God blessed Lot's 2 daughters with children. Now, why would he do that? Lot's daughters raped their father, got him drunk, allegedly, according to the story, and yet God blessed that. God not only blessed each daughter who raped their own father, got him drunk, and literally raped their own father. God not only blessed it by giving them each a child, but each child went on to be the father of nations, the ultimate blessing Lot could have had from that experience. We can go down those roads. I'm doing a series. Yeah. I mean, but that's really not what I brought you here for. You know, I mean, I would love to host a debate. If you and John Anthony want to debate and you guys can debate, I could. I'm not a very good debater. I'm like, you're wrong. This is why you're wrong. I'm just not good at them. But
so I will say this, because I take the claim of homophobia very seriously.
Thank you.
And I don't consider myself a homophobe. And I will tell you,
you have a gay friend.
Exact position. I have just one gay friend. That's all, only one.
Somebody said that in the chat. Yeah.
Yeah, and like that's why I hate the term, but like I had to bring that up because I have to bring it up because otherwise I'm accused of never talking with and experiencing, with like sharing in the experience with these people and all that sort of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I will say this. So my old podcast was called The Religious Nut and Hellbound Sinner. It was with a transgender atheist psychologist friend of mine. And we discussed these issues. And my friend would have never accused me. We don't talk anymore, but that has nothing to do with it. Was a personal falling out between each other, kind of thing. My friend would have never called me homophobe. And I gave this exact position to my friend. Same thing with my roommates. Like I've talked about, I was the only straight man in an apartment, and they all knew my position. They all brought in their friends and they all did their stuff. And well, not all of them, but they brought in their friends. They did their stuff. I didn't judge them or condemn them or tell them they're going to hell, all that sort of stuff. And I have had many of them confide in me because they knew I was going into ministry. Many of them confide into me some of the horrors that they've experienced, both from the church and from their lives within the LGBTQ community. I've had them cry on my shoulders. I've had them talk to me about these issues, and I have empathized with them, and I have given them nothing but love. And they know my position on all of this, so I would hardly call that homophobic.
Right.
So I would caution people against using that term.
I know. It's odd though. The more you went through your description, the more homophobic it sounded. I know that sounds. It's hard because I think because our perspectives are so different. It just am I wrong, chat? It sure sound. I mean, actually, part of the reason why I keyed on that was because they're going. You have this and they're that. I think it's just a tough deal. And Utah Outcast. Let me just say real quick. They made a point. There was a point they said. I got a couple of points. One, they said that I said I was having a nice morning show with you, and I didn't want to. And their notion is that to do so, though, I'm condoning what you stand for and the oppression that you stand for. And
you obviously don't.
Well, I don't. That's not my intention, but I could see. Matter of fact, Richard Madsen. I really like Richard Madsen. Richard Madsen wanted to do a video series with me. This is just an interview. I had Richard Madsen on the show. It was fine. He wanted to do an interview with me because he believes Christian doctrine is wrong. I do too, right? I'm like, all right. And he wants to help me. But I clicked that he's actually some kind of Christian. I don't really understand. And I'm like, no, because that would actually mean that I'm helping you spread your nutbaggery. And that's not what I'm doing. And folks, that wasn't my intention. Like I said at the beginning of the show, there are things that we do agree upon. Especially now, we don't obviously anybody who knows anything about Catholic anything, you're going to know they're going to be against gay marriage. They're going to be against abortion. They're going to be against this. They're going to be against that. To have you on the show and expect otherwise is a little bit unfair. Now, if I had asked you on the show, and this is what people don't know, so I apologize, people in the chat, if you don't know this. That's not what I asked you here for. I did not ask you intentionally to come here and dig you and try to change your beliefs. I came here to try to understand your beliefs.
And I'll say this: I'm not interested in trying to change anyone's beliefs here either, because I'm presenting my positions and what I believe, and you can take it or leave it. I do what you want to do. You know?
Right. See, some of these oppression of gay man as a friendship. See, I think I understand that. That, of course, again, that wasn't my intention, and I don't think that's your intention either. I think it's just I knew we were going to have issues, some kind of issues.
Yeah.
You know, you clearly you don't see your views as wrong and harmful, and yet we do. It's hard from my perspective. It's almost hard not to. Now I understand how you see. I mean, you've got me. We're on the same page. Whenever I don't like it when the government tells me where to put my dick. I don't like that. When you say that, I'm like, that's wonderful. When you tell me the government, you don't want me and you're on the same page, and then you'll turn around and you'll say, gay marriage is a sin. Or gay sex is a sin, or this is a sin, or that is a sin. Now, there's also a difference between you guys can sin all you want to over, I don't care. Or, oh my God, that's a sin. You need to stop it now.
Yeah.
And your position has been, as far as I've understood, I don't agree with that, but you guys do what you want to. That's what I thought your deal was. And we really shouldn't expect anything other than that from you. Matter of fact, I also expected it to be harder. So that's kind of why I'm a little confused. But I do understand.
Yeah, and also,
go ahead.
Real quick, I'll say also, I'm a lifelong virgin. I'm 33, and I am not going to be having sex until I'm married.
That explains a lot.
That does. Yeah, probably does explain a lot. So
let me show you these videos. He'll blow up.
No, that is to say, now that's not to say that I've been a perfect little, I've towed the line on stuff. Like, I've not been perfect, but I've not engaged in sex, and that is my position. And I think that and so I wouldn't say it's, so I wouldn't say that it's wrong. Like, it is wrong for me. I would say, I consider it wrong to have sex outside of marriage, even if it's a guy and a girl. Okay.
Okay.
Does that make me a phobic of that? Like, I think it is wrong.
I understand. No, I get that. Yeah, I get that. I see the difference. I see the hairs you're trying to split there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So my position is the same. So if it was a guy and a girl outside of marriage who were having sex and they were asking me my opinion on it, I would say it's a sin. And I have actually done that. I have said that. They've asked me, and I've said it is a sin. Yeah. And if it's a guy and a guy, I say I would consider it a sin too. So, like, to say that one is a phobia and the other is not is an odd position, I would say.
Right. Yeah. And see, this is, I agree. Best Name Ever says that we're just disgusted by his views, but I understand that you need to listen to them to know what they are. Doesn't mean that we agree with you. Absolutely. One of the things, again, I mean, I've said this, and a lot of people who are here right now weren't here at the beginning when I said, this is what's going on. This is who he is. We want to learn. Normally, oftentimes, I was telling this to Andy yesterday, I will interrupt a guest with the word I do this. Oh, you do that? I do this. And I'll interrupt the story to tell about me. I do that really a lot. I'm a bad interviewer. With you, I've tried to shut that up a lot and let you tell what you're going to tell. I tried to let you explain your thought rather than halfway through each thought go, oh, I disagree with that, and this is why, and you're a bad person, and I disagree with that. And because you'd have never got to the end of your story. I really just wanted to understand you and what you were. Again, for those of you who don't know, he challenged me to a debate a few months ago. I said no. I'm like, you're just some troll in my chat. Why would I debate you? Didn't I? Yeah. So that's kind of the deal. Now, I've invited you on the morning show. We've gone past the hour. I thank you very much. I would not be against getting you on some form of, I prefer a conversation. And I say that because I'm not good with debates, because I don't do it very well. I get passionate. So let me hit you up with a few more questions if you have some more time from the chat, and I'll just ask them straight out. So that's the deal. I'm just wanted to clarify with everybody. I have no intention of propagating his nutbaggery. It's my nutbaggery I want to propagate. I said that right from the beginning. I just wanted to know. I needed to understand what the deal was. And I thought, let's get the guy on the show. He asked yesterday, I sent out a deal. And I said, anybody want to be on the show? Let me know. He said, yeah. So here he is. I'd love to get Utah Atheist, all of you. There's more than one. There's a group of them. I'd love to get you all on the show. So let me ask a couple more questions. Question for Deacon James. Does Does with this, okay.
Is it another gay thing?
No. We're moving away from, can we move away from the gay thing, from sex altogether? You're fine with that?
Yeah, it's fine.
Please. Yeah. I know. It keeps coming up. It keeps popping up. So it says, Deacon James, with man, this is impossible, but with God, all things are possible. Does that mean God is omnipotent and can do anything anywhere? I think that's the question. Question for you. Do you believe that God can do anything anywhere?
Yeah, the implication is God is omnipotent.
Yes.
So, however, I think sometimes we understand omnipotence on a lay person's level, which is a wrong way. So when people think of omnipotence, they think that it means that anything, you can string together a bunch of words and like you could just add the phrase God can do that to it. So like, oh, God can make a square circle. Well, no, God can't make a square circle because the idea of a square circle is logically incoherent. It is not a thing that is logically possible. Gotcha. So with that idea, what's not being said is, God can do logically impossible things. It's within the context of those of what is logically possible, what is an actual coherent phrase to say. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yes. I think it does. I'm trying to keep up with some of the chat here and get some of these questions out. Another one. Yeah, I'm trying to be polite.
Hey, be as whatever as you want.
Right. Well, we're done now. Yeah, we're almost done. Because in my views, I got a whole lot wrong with Christianity altogether. I got a whole lot wrong with why would you believe, when you go back and look at the Old Testament, why would you believe in this God? It's an evil, horrible God monster. Mm-hmm. Throughout the text, it does these horrible things. Jesus, all right, so let me ask you, is Jesus God? If Jesus is God, then did Jesus kill babies?
Did Jesus kill babies?
Yes. If Jesus is God, God killed babies throughout the Old Testament, killed all manner of folk throughout the Old Testament. Mm-hmm. Then Jesus killed those people. If Jesus is God.
Well, even if you take away the Old Testament passages that people have problems with, there's just the general fact that babies die. So in that sense, yeah.
That's not what I meant. Well, see, that's the whole deal. Whenever
I guess you're talking about like sort of the intention to murder babies. Well, that is implied. Okay.
You took out the part where you said if you take out the scriptures where God murders babies, you can't do that. I mean, that's
no. My point is being that even if we take those away, even if we want to say that God never did those things, mm-hmm. the fact remains that children and infants die.
Right. That
was my point. My point was not to. Yeah. My point was to actually strengthen your argument, not to weaken it.
No, as babies die, I'm talking about there's a natural death that babies, let's say a baby dies of a natural, but to actually take credit for that murder, that's a different thing, you know?
No. Yeah. So, but my point was to say that, like I said before, to strengthen your argument that even if it's not the case that those things happened in the Old Testament, then you still have that problem. So now with the Old Testament, I will say a book that I've read that is really good is called Is God a Moral Monster by Paul Copan. One of the problems that we have today is that we read the scriptures in a modern context, in a modern context. So this is not to disparage you, but you do not know Hebrew or Greek, do you?
No.
Okay. So when you're reading the Old Testament, you're taking what the King James or ESV or NIV Bible, and you're just sort of reading what the translators have put there.
Absolutely.
So, and that's its own thing.
However, I have a point on that, but continue.
Yeah. So in the actual studying of the Old Testament, we are not, the traditional Christian faith has not held what the Baptists and sort of American evangelicals hold to, where it's just like, oh, well, I read my Bible, and like the Holy Spirit's just going to tell me exactly what it means, and so therefore any interpretation that I come up with is accurate. Like that's why we have so many denominations today, is that people just go, oh, well, I don't need to study this thing, in its historical context. I just need to read it, and it's just going to osmosis come to me,
Right.
So that's the problem with modern evangelicalism. So you actually have to go into delving into the Hebrew and the Greek and understanding the actual historical context. So one of the arguments that's made in Copen's book is that when they talk about this sort of idea of, kill everyone sort of thing and all that sort of stuff, that is sort of hyperbolic language that was used, and we see demonstrations of this actually in scripture itself, but also in other ancient texts of around that same time, like Sumerian and all that sort of stuff. It's just sort of like leave no man alive and all that sort of stuff like that.
Right.
So the idea is that these are hyperbolic statements that don't necessarily mean that that is actually what happened. Right. Now you can take it or leave it, but that is an answer that people have.
Okay, well, one of the things that I often point to, especially in my video series, and this is one of the things that you and I talked about, I think in this chat in the beginning, is that how many people go back and study the ancient Hebrew or even know about it or anything? I mean, if the only way you can go back and understand God's true message is by learning these things, then the Bible is trash. Billions of people have read the New Testament, and since they didn't read the true meaning and go back to the ancient Hebrew and the ancient Arabic, they didn't get the true meaning, therefore it's trash. I mean, this notion that you have to go back and you have to read some secret code, and most people will never know that code, then what's the purpose of writing a book like that? Why even have it?
So this presupposes an evangelical understanding where every single person is supposed to be an expert on the Bible and like sort of know everything about it and sort of stuff.
That's right. I mean, if you're going to go ahead with your point.
So the point of priests and the point of clergy and the point of scholars is to actually do this hard work. And like I had to learn Hebrew and I had to learn Greek for my seminary degree. Most master's degrees are like a year, maybe 2 years. For a master's of divinity, I have to, it's a 3-year degree. It can be 4 years also. And that's just the basic to become a priest. Like every priest has to have that, and there are very few exceptions. So you have to learn Hebrew, you have to learn Greek, you have to learn what's called systematic theology, you have to learn history. It is a it's an interdisciplinary study. So it's actually a very rigorous thing. So we're learning these things, and from there we're supposed to actually be explaining these things to the people, our parishioners. And the whole reason for that is that this is a very difficult set of things. Are you expecting not you, but are people expecting everyone to study and learn Greek and Hebrew and then to study history, which means also learning a little bit of Latin? I learned Latin. In going into all this sorts of stuff, no, they don't have time for that. They have to do their jobs as plumbers, as doctors, as lawyers, etc. So it's my job as the priest to do that. Now, if you want to question that and all that sort of stuff, that's fine. But I don't expect you're not a scientist, right?
Right. No.
So you have to rely upon the scientists who actually study these things.
That's
so you've
true.
never. So I take it you would believe in evolution or something like that, right?
Well, but let's talk about back to the different translations. We have God. This is God. This is the all-knowing, all-powerful, omniscient God. Why would he write a manuscript telling people how to save their souls, the most important message you could give a person, and write it in an ancient language that nobody can get? You can't say that there's not a perfect language that anybody across any vocabulary can understand, because we have mathematics. Mathematics demonstrates a prime language that is the same no matter where, no matter when. 1,000 years from now, 1,000 years ago, mathematics was the same. Now, not that people actually did it, but you know what I mean? 2 + 2 = 4 every time. Why would God need to speak in some ancient dead language that people have to translate? And then, like you said, we agreed at the beginning of this, people are bad. We started with that. People are bad. We don't need religion to hurt people. People will hurt people. Religion just kind of helps. Well, now let's throw that religion in there. You've depended, you had the ability, because if God were real, he's already done it once with the purity of the language of mathematics. You have the ability to give us a pure message, and yet you don't. You couch it in all these metaphors and stories, and some stories are real and some stories are not real. God did not kill these people, even though in the Bible, it literally says the Lord said, go from this place and murder these people. No, that's all a metaphor. That's just a story. It's just a story or just a metaphor when it's convenient from the Christian side to defend the atrocities of this God monster in the Bible.
Mhm.
See?
So, if I say it's raining cats and dogs, in our
Uh,
context, you would understand I'm not saying that there are literal, if you go outside, cats and dogs that are falling from the sky,
mhm.
for instance, correct?
Right.
So what's happening is we're actually, you can't import, like I said, modern positions into an ancient text. Now, the point for that is this. When it comes to, and this again goes back to the problem again, and I keep harping on this, is that there's an evangelical American mentality where it is the Bible alone, and it just sort of fell out of the sky one day, and people were like, oh wait, what is this? Oh, it talks about things.
Right.
No. Like the scripture is within the larger believing community context, and that community has always existed since the first writing of, say, Job. Okay, Job is considered the oldest of the books in the Bible. So what is happening is, oh, there is, it's not just a story. It's a story, yes, but it is also this community that was first told the story, and the story is unfolding further and further and further with this community, and this community has gotten wider and wider and wider until it is worldwide. So what has to happen is that we have to look at the story of scripture within the context of the people. And then the other thing is that
I get that.
the most fundamental part of Christianity is not the Bible. The most fundamental part of Christianity is Jesus. So
But
we look at Jesus as the actual representative of who God is on earth. And then from there we look at scripture
and where do you
as
get
the
that view of
outpouring of that.
Jesus?
So we get that view of Jesus partly within scripture, but also within the believing community. So
And
it's actually both.
see that
So
the
you have scripture, but then you also have the community of believers who existed before the completion of scripture. So you have that two-pronged sort of thing
right.
walking through history. So you have to look at it as how it has been interpreted. So for instance, the idea of like the God of the Old Testament being bad kind of thing, that is a very ancient belief. So you've got people like Marcion, who was in the 2nd century, who was claiming all these things. Oh, like look at this stuff in the Bible, this, in the Old Testament, so clearly the Old Testament God is not the same God as Jesus. So then people had to answer the questions that were asked there, that were being argued there. So this is not a new thing. It's not like suddenly in the 20th century or the 19th century, people were like, oh, wait a minute, there's some really messed up stuff in here. What are we going to do with this stuff? Oh, well, let's make up these ideas and all this sort of stuff. No, these have been things that have been debated and discussed for actually, honestly, over 2,000 years.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I understand this. Actually being from the outside and being not part of that Christian group that you mentioned where they believe the Bible came from I understand how it's written by many people over many different years and how this and this and this. It's the separation of, listen, if this is God, this is God. God knows all. He sees all. I mean, the notion that he would write, then we're just talking about the Bible, the notion that he would write all this stuff. And not only is he going to write it, but he's going to, again, let's couch everything in metaphor and then make it horrible, vicious metaphor. Jesus is the story of the New Testament. God is the Old Testament, but Jesus is just the face of God. Jesus is supposed to be just the physical incarnation of God on earth. Therefore, you can't really separate the monster that is in the Old Testament. I mean, there was, was it Onan who pulled out and
God killed for that.
But wait, God wanted him to have sex and conceive with his brother's wife? Really?
Well, he was dead, but yeah.
I know he was dead, but that's still not cool. That's not cool. Even in the South of the United States, that kind of raised an eyebrow. You know what I mean?
It's an indication. Yeah, it is an indication that God cares about procreation as part of the whole.
And Abram was incestuous and married his own sister. And, he came from a family of incestuous people. You know that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
how do you... I think it was stepsister, if I recall, but yeah.
Half sister. Yeah. His father's daughter. His father's daughter. Yeah. And not only that, but then there, his brother, what's his brother's name? He had a brother named Nahor. His brother Nahor had at least two children, Lot and a daughter. And that brother died. And then Abram's other brother married that daughter. This is an incestuous man from an incestuous family, and that's the father of the Abrahamic religion. He went on to give his wife to Pharaoh, and then he tried to give her to another man. This is the patriarch of the entire foundation of the religion, and he leads an absolutely amoral life, immoral life.
Yeah. So that presupposes that the word in Hebrew for brother and sister is always used in the same way that we would.
That gentleman in chapter 20, he said, why the second king that he tried to give his sister wife to said, why did you give your wife to me and tell me she was your sister? And he says, because she is my sister. She is now. All right. So even if the word sister is wrong, he literally goes on to describe she is the daughter of my father, not though not my mother. So you can't really.
And I'm talking with, and I'm talking with like a broader understanding of this all. So my point being though that this is actually it's a weird way, but I am actually kind of thankful for these understandings, because it shows that even imperfect and really messed up people can actually be used by God.
But see, that's a horrible example. I mean,
it is an absolutely horrible example, because you know what? I have not done something nearly as disgusting as that. Also, you have to look at the fact that the ancient culture, again, this was a more common thing to be done.
But you know, the God, my understanding, it depends on the Christian you're talking to, the God who is looking at us right now, he knows Chris's name, and he knows Chris wears glasses. That God 2,000 years ago, because he's omniscient, omnipresent, whatever, he knows the beginning from the end from the beginning. He knows everything. 2,000 years ago, he knew Chris was going to be here, and he knew Chris was going to wear glasses. Why didn't he know slavery was wrong back then? And why didn't he write it in his Bible? Why did he use all these horrible examples where all right, so the first murder in the Bible is a brother murdering a brother for the love of God. And they've been doing that ever since. Christian has been Christian
because of love of God. I would say it's because of jealousy and envy.
Jealousy over whom?
Jealousy over the fact that his offering was accepted and his was not.
Offering accepted by who?
By God.
By God. That's right. God, it says he gave the best of his efforts. His brother gave the best of his efforts. God shunned him. Why? It doesn't say why God shunned him. What more could he have done?
Yeah, it doesn't say.
So God shuns him, and then he's like, so he gets all sad face. He's like, I'm sad. And he looks down at the ground. I'm sad. And God's like, don't look down at the ground. Raise your head. Don't be sad. If you do right, you will be rewarded. If you do wrong, evil is crouching at your door. The man, according to the story, has done nothing wrong other than give his best. He literally, because of God, goes and kills his own brother because he's not getting the affection from God that he wants. And men
so
have
in
been,
that passage, Cain was actually not himself rejected. It was his offering that was rejected.
And what happened to Cain? I understand. Oh,
and then Cain got angry about that. Cain got so the way I take that away.
But wait, Cain was raised by Adam and Eve in the pure presence of a loving God, and yet because he was shunned, to read the story only once, we would assume it would take more than that to set this guy off. But being raised by Adam and Eve, literally in the garden, walking with God, and yet he commits murder.
Yeah. So my point being that with the Cain and Abel story, Cain was not actually rejected himself. His offering was rejected.
Okay. And I can get that.
So the way I understand it is with that passage, God's like, dude, basically, I'm modernizing the language here. Dude, why are you upset? I don't have to accept your offering. That doesn't mean that I hate you. Like, pick yourself up. Be a man, basically.
Right.
And so then Cain then goes and kills Abel.
Yeah. Well, again, I appreciate your softening the version up, but that's kind of the way it went beautifully, except for he says, and I only know this because I literally just did an Evil God Monster of Abraham series on this. He says, if you do what is right, he literally lambasts this guy verbally. You're a bad person. Evil is crouching at your door. If you don't do what is good, and then of course, so basically it all comes back to God. Cain wanted God's attention, affection, approval. He wasn't getting it because of Abel and because of whatever. So he went and murdered his brother. And we have billions of people who have been murdered since then in the name of God. Whether we talk about the old Judaic, the fighting between the Judaic tribes that used to war amongst themselves. They would get their judges who would come along and do their thing. From that, you go down to Christianity, Christians murdering pagans, pagans murdering Christians, Christians writing their little stories about how they were overly oppressed when they weren't quite overly oppressed, because we do. Well, they continue to do that, right? It's like the Karens of society. And then, of course, you bring in Islam. And Islam is murder, death, kill from the beginning. You know, for those who don't know, Muhammad was raised up over in that area. And at first he was surrounded by Christians, and he had his own notion. He's surrounded by Jews and Christians, and he taught kind of a message, a little bit of peace. But as he got more and more power and more control, that peace became cut off their heads, cut off their fingertips, do all these things.
Yeah.
Again, brother, now who is the father of so Ishmael is the son of Hagar, and he is believed to have gone on to be the father of the Muslims.
That's what their belief is.
Okay, yeah. So the Ishmael, his descendants are killing the descendants of Isaac. The Muslims are slaughtering the descendants of the Jews. It's been a thing for years and years and years. Am I wrong? I'm not wrong. When you look at the murder, death, kill that goes on throughout the Bible, Noah has 3 sons, Shem, Japheth, and Canaan. Ham. Ham sees Noah naked. Noah gets mad about it and curses Ham's son, an innocent child, as far as we know, to a life of slavery. And then Ham's descendants go on and they become the Canaanites. They become the people who founded Sodom and Gomorrah, you know, and Shem's son goes on to become Moses. So these are the descendants of Noah. All of these people are the children of Noah. And yet Moses slaughters his way through who? The Canaanites. To get to a land promised to him by God that they already lived on. Murder, death, kill, murder, death, kill. I mean, there's no examples of art, music, love. I mean, the love that's in the Bible is, you know.
There are plenty of examples of art and music and love. What are you talking about?
Art?
I mean, yeah. Oh, first of all, you look at the
no. I'm not talking about people who over the centuries have created beautiful art or beautiful music. I'm talking about whenever
I'm
you
talking
read the
about
stories
within the Old Testament itself. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I mean, we have an entire book of the Bible that is it's called the Psalms, and that is literally a collection of songs.
Well, that is true. That is true. Psalm 127, isn't it 127 that tells you that if you're to bash the children, to grab them by the ankles and bash them against the rocks.
Oh yeah.
Right? So
and
So I guess there are songs in there. It's not like Mariah Carey.
So as an example, actually, if you read most of the Psalms, so we actually go through the Psalms either in a 30-day segment or a 60-day segment, depending on how we use them. For my morning prayer stuff, I do the 60-day one because just to make it a little bit shorter. But yeah, we go through the Psalms at least every 2 months, if not every month.
Are the Psalms Old Testament or New Testament?
They're Old Testament, yeah. Okay. So, for instance, with the Psalm 127, the point of the Psalms is to express and show the entire range of emotions that humanity is capable of. So you have Psalms that are about forgiveness, Psalms that are about anger.
137.
And so, for instance, it's 137. I thought it was 127. I thought
so too. No? Psalm 130 is the most.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's 127.
The atheist Mo says Psalm 137:9 is smashing.
Maybe it's wrong.
Anyway, we know what we're talking about. Carry on.
But my point being that, so for instance, with a psalm like that, where it's talking about the bashing of the baby, that shows the full range of absolute violence and hatred towards one's enemies, who's been besieging the people of Israel. And the point of the Psalms is not to say that the things that the psalmist, the person who's writing these Psalms, or the people, because there's multiple people, it's not saying that their feelings are therefore accurate or godly even. The point is saying this is the expressive range of emotion. So there are times where you are so angry at your enemies that you actually are like, I just want even their children dead, kind of thing.
That's an interesting.
So it shows. Yeah.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
The point of the Psalms is not to say that every single expression is a statement of like you should have this feeling. The point of the Psalms is an avenue for us to be like, this these are the feelings I'm feeling within this creation.
Right. Well, yeah, that's an interesting take on the Psalms. Now, the Psalm we're specifically talking about, the smashing of the babies. My understanding of that, and obviously we just brought it up, so I'm not. It's been a while since I've thought about it, but my understanding of the situation is, in their defense, they had been attacked. People had been killing them, killing their children, killing their babies, and this is a song telling them to be joyful, to revisit that pain back on your enemies. It's not telling them to just willy-nilly go out and take your enemies and bash her. I think it's more specifically in this particular case, those enemies who have done this to you, do that to those children. Happy shall he be who dashes his enemies upon the rocks. The subtitle being, who dashed your children upon the rocks. That all being said, that's not the teachings of a merciful, loving God. That's a matter of fact, that's probably again? The most worst example. 137.9.
It is 137?
Well, I don't know. It's either 127, Psalm 127 or 137.
Mm-hmm. No, but my whole point though is that these are, again, not saying, so I think that, so there's a lot of presuppositions that go into all this sort of conversation, which I think is always the problem in these sort of atheist, theist, or Christian, non-Christian debates, is that we are recognizing the presuppositions. So for me, I'm saying, why are you understanding the scriptures this particular way? And then I'm realizing, oh, wait a minute.
Because it literally says that. It literally says that.
No. Hey, my point is this. Then I'm realizing, wait a minute. How did I look at these passages, if I ever even was presented them, when I was a Baptist? And I'm going, oh, that's why. So this is one, there's so many presuppositions that are being packed into this. And this is the problem I have with a modern day American evangelicalism. So they look at the Bible as, again, it is this thing that God sort of dropped out from the sky. And obviously they wouldn't say that's literally, but that is the mindset.
Yeah.
So God literally dictated it. And it was like,
I've heard that.
Now Paul say this, or write this. Okay, now Paul write that. Like, that's the mindset. Rather, what the scriptures are is, we our scriptural theology it should be the same as our different. But anyway, the idea is that these are actually written by man, but it is inspired by the Holy Spirit. And so you take that part first. So then the second part with that is the idea of each and every single one of these books, and even chapters within the books, are written for different reasons. Okay? So you don't take the Psalms and you don't read them the same way that you would read, say, the book of Isaiah.
But do you understand the level of education and understanding a person has to know to get all that? And then to think that the average person, billions of people have been on this planet. I'm thinking probably hundreds of billions of people who have been on this planet since those texts were written. And yet only those who have the secret decoder ring get the magic.
No, it's
message.
Not a secret decoder ring.
But it may as well be. You can't read Psalm 127 unless you read it in the same scope that you read Isaiah 4, unless you read it in the same scope. You know what I mean?
But recall what I said before. My point was, this is a few minutes before, where I said, it's not just the Bible itself. That's the other problem. So there's the other problem. Yeah, it's not just, oh, well, this is not a Bible. This is actually my prayer book. It's not just the Bible itself. So the prayer book has all the Psalms in it. And I was looking from it because that's my favorite translation of the Psalms. The Bible is not, you don't just give someone a Bible and say, here, now that you've, quote, accepted Jesus as your personal savior or whatever, you just read this and you don't need anything else. It is, again, a community of people. The people of God is the constant idea that is pushed throughout Scripture. It begins with Abraham, and then it grows and grows and grows until it becomes a worldwide thing. So you have to read not just the book, but you actually have to look at how the book has been understood by the people of God, throughout the centuries, throughout the millennia. Absolutely. So yes, you can't just go into, you can't do this with anything. You can't go into, you can't like pick up a Sumerian text or the Epic of Gilgamesh and just be like, oh, well, obviously this is this means this and this means that. when you have done no studying about it. You have to actually study, and you can't just rely upon a translation. That's why you have to rely upon the community. There's no such thing as an island Christian in Christian theology.
Totally get that.
You have to have it within a community.
Right. Okay. Now you're talking about the community, and the Bible is the book and the community. And that's what I'm talking about. We've got a book that is dripping with blood, murder, incest, death, rape. It's dripping with these things. And then we've got 2,000+ years of murder, death, kill, murder, death, kill, murder, death, kill in the name of God. So exactly what you're talking about. The book and its followers have given us this example over time.
So yeah, I would have a major problem with that interpretation and understanding. So for instance,
I mean,
I'm about to say, yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
So the first one is that I don't think it's dripping nearly as much as you're saying it is within the scriptures. All right.
Okay. Can I give you a few examples?
Well, we already have. But
okay. Yeah, never mind. Go ahead. Yeah, I've given lots of examples. I mean, he literally wipes out everybody on the planet once, according to his own claim. Murders every person on the planet, man, woman, child, puppy, kitten, all of them dead.
Yeah. All right.
That's him, though. That's not the people murdering each other. So carry on.
All right. So we have that. And then we have the actual community of believers themselves. Okay. Now the church, the alleged violence about the church, about the history of the church, is really overplayed. And I mean that in all sincerity, because you look at, so for instance, you look at the first, I want to say like 1,000 years almost of Christianity, almost completely no bloodshed. It is, in fact, they're the.
I don't get how you get that, dude.
Yeah, I don't get. So
the first crusade started like, well, when did the crusades?
Yeah, the first 1,000 years. I said the first 1,000 years.
Right.
The first crusade happened in 1095 or 1096, around that time. So the first 1,000 years.
Okay, I could give the first crusade, but I would be hard pressed to believe that there was no murder, death, kill put on by Christians.
Oh, I didn't say there was no murder.
You know, but you know what I mean.
True, everybody.
Yeah.
So there, and I think there's a different standard.
But you know, shouldn't they have a special? I mean, dude, they're on the right side. They have the winning side. It's like, shouldn't every? Okay, I'll let you. Okay. I'm a bad man.
Yeah. It's okay. So we have, for the first 1,000 years, we don't have. I can't think of any major wars or anything that was even started by Christians in general. You have squabbles of that just would have happened in general anyway. So the first one that you could actually point to is over 1,000 years after the life of Jesus. Okay. The first crusade.
I would have to.
And that is okay. And that is literally a response to the persecutions happening against Christians by Muslims. All right. And then the first crusade is the recapture of Jerusalem. Okay. Then after that, you see a devolving of actual intention with the crusades. So the second and the third and the fourth. The third is really romanticized in a lot of ways. But that's just regardless. And then the fourth being just sort of this ridiculous one. So you've got that. Okay. And then the problem that we would perceive within church history would be sort of the corruption of the papacy and all that sort of stuff that we could talk about. But with all of this happening, the problem is that the Enlightenment era and post-Enlightenment era decided to sort of like create this idea of, oh, the church is anti-science, the church is a bunch of warmongers and all that sort of stuff. And then when we say, no, the church isn't anti-science, then you get to the question of, oh, well, what about Galileo? And this is an example. You get like the problem of, oh, Galileo, because the church said, oh, he was contradicting the Bible. No, the reason Galileo was actually told to stop writing and was threatened with being burned at the stake was actually because of the pride of the Pope. He was insulting the Pope. So Galileo brought out his book and said, hey, I want to publish this. And so in like the church was like, okay, fine, you can publish it. And then he published it. And in the book itself, he was just making fun of the Pope. He made the Pope to be like some idiot. And that was his book on rejecting geocentrism. And so because of that, the Pope was upset and he was like, okay, I'm just going to threaten to burn you at the stake kind of thing. That's that sort of stuff. But if you look at the science of the day, the science was against Galileo. And that is how science is done, like by evidence. The scientific stuff that they had is all pointed to the fact that, or the idea that geocentrism was true. I'm not a geocentrist. Geocentrism is not true.
Right.
But what happens is so for instance, you know how the whole parallax thing happens, where that's how they measure the distance of a star. So if you go in June versus December and you measure the angle of a star or some other planetary body, you can make a triangle, and since you know the base of the triangle, you can discover how far it is, kind of thing.
Gotcha.
That's what parallax is. Their argument was, hey, look, if heliocentrism is true, we should be able to do that. But we don't see the stars doing that. Now, the reason they don't see the stars doing that, making that angle difference and able to do a parallax measurement with it, the reason they don't see it is because for most stars, it's so far away that you can't do that measurement style. So their actual arguments were scientific against Galileo, not because of, oh, the Bible told me so. And so, like, there's this misapprehension and misunderstanding of church history, largely from sort of philosophers who were opposed to the church, and just sort of making up arguments. The church killed so many people and did this and that. Like, that's a huge exaggeration of what the actual facts are. And we could go into all sorts of facts on those, but I'd have to actually do my research again on all that sort of stuff, because like I want to be able to make claims and actually back them up with citations and stuff like that. And like, this isn't a debate show anyway, so I wasn't actually planning on doing a debate. So like,
I wasn't
either.
either.
Like, no, but like, so we can get into those sorts of things. But so like, that's why I offer books like the Paul Copan one and all that sort of stuff, because these get into those discussions.
Yeah, well, I would have to disagree with that.
Okay.
I mean, just that we have this mountain of evidence, lots of history. Now, specifically about Galileo, I couldn't say for sure. We have the entire thing called the Spanish Inquisition. We've got that. Yep. Let's ask though, who killed more people, the people doing the Spanish Inquisition, or when Pope John Paul II and Mother Teresa told the Africans suffering through AIDS not to use condoms? Who killed more people? Who would you suspect?
Oh, well, so the problem with your second one is that Pope John Paul II and Mother Teresa are not saying don't use condoms but have all the sex you want. They're saying don't use condoms because don't have sex.
Right, and that's a ridiculous proposition to have. That's
Oh,
ridiculous.
I don't think it is, because I think humanity is capable of not having.
They've clearly proved that they're not.
I think we're capable of it.
7 billion people, you know.
So yeah, so
and to not have sex based on things like, you know, there's this creature watching you all the time and will know when you do good.
God wouldn't be considered a creature. Well, and like, you don't have it as that sort of mindset. Like so my reasons for my understanding of sex were never because God is watching. If you notice, my arguments were within the understanding of what is the purpose of sex. And
well, yeah, that's true.
What are the real world consequences of treating sex as a mere pleasure rather than as an actual sacred and important and grave act that we need to take seriously? You know,
that's an interesting belief. Well, yeah, coming from a 33-year-old virgin.
7 more years, and I'll be Steve Carell.
It's goals. You got to have goals to live up to, you know. You know what, man? It's been almost a couple hours. I want to thank you for being on the show.
I've enjoyed it.
I appreciate it. Yeah. Well, I'll have to have you on for something a little more normal. Like I said, the first part of the show, I was really trying to be nice. Because we knew what you're about. So for me to go, oh my God, and clutch my pearls because you say you're against abortion or because you say you're against gay sex, I shouldn't do that, because that's what you're here for. That's what you're about. Putting you on the spot and expecting you to justify those was not the show I was trying to have. But it turned out.
Well, it's fine. And yeah. And like, I will say, like, I was debating if I should like study up and prepare for any sort of questions that might have been had like that. But I was like, oh, it's a morning show. It's gonna be lighthearted, and so it put me. I'm not like faulting you at all. Like, you're the host. You do whatever you want. But yeah, I can I have books that I can recommend, like I just did. But these are things where if I'm going to have a debate about them, I want to make sure that I'm up to date with all of my information and that I can say, oh, you can look to this primary source, you can look to that, and you can actually, this is the argumentation itself. Right now, I'm just giving sort of like what I recall from what I've studied in the past years. Of course.
As a tiny bit of advice that you can take or not. If I were in your position looking to debate atheists, one of the things I would do is I would go watch Christopher Hitchens and Stephen Fry debate a couple of bishops from a Catholic church. Because if I were going to debate you, that's what I would do as an atheist.
Oh, so I've watched Christopher Hitchens. I've not watched any Stephen Fry debates. I didn't even know he did any, but I've watched Dawkins. Like I said before the show, Rowan Williams and Richard Dawkins do a really great debate. Well, Rowan Williams is a hero of mine.
I wrote his name down. I'll have to check him out. There's a debate you can find on the internet where they did a debate. I believe it was in a huge Catholic church. They did a poll beforehand. Do you think Catholicism is a force for good or bad or whatever? I think that was the topic. And you can go watch the results of before the debate. What happened during the debate? Stephen Fry, Chris Hitchens, a couple of really tall up in the trough, a couple of bishops, whatever they are. Pardon me for not knowing. And it was really good. Again, if you and I were going to debate on the show about something such as that, I would go watch those two, Chris Hitchens and Stephen Fry, and go, that's a great point, and that's a great point, and you should expect to see those points coming at you in the debate. So if you're going to debate an atheist, you probably should go watch that, because as a Catholic,
I've seen plenty of Christopher Hitchens. I've seen him debate William Lane Craig. I've seen him debate Frank Turek. I've seen him debate quite a few others. I mean, he's passed on now, unfortunately. But I've seen Matt Dillahunty. I've seen Aaron Raw. Even I've seen like all range. Like when I was an agnostic, those were the debates I went to. I went to the quote 4 Horsemen of the Apocalypse. So Sam Harris, all them. Like I've seen all sorts of. So like Chris Hitchens was and is an intelligent man. He's very polemical. Like my problem with him is that his arguments are more feelings based rather than intellectual. So that is the problem I have with him. But he's a really smart guy, and
he was one of my first I watched. Whenever Jerry Falwell passed away and Chris Hitchens came up on CNN with Anderson Cooper, and everybody's Jerry Falwell. He's like, Jerry Falwell should have been selling pencils from a cup out on the street. I was like, oh my God, I found my spirit animal. So
I share that sentiment. I just don't think it's right to do it in the midst of people mourning. But yeah.
Well, that's sort of like
I don't care for Jerry Falwell.
Yeah. So that's a long conversation. See, and that's the whole deal. I really got to there are people talking about the debates. I've got a couple of people. I want to line up some debates probably in the evening. I wanted to get one set up in the afternoon or evening between Paul Cammish and Chris from the Science Talk TV. But their time zones, one's in Vietnam and one's in England, so it's really hard to get the time zones. Wow. That's been my issue with them. And then like you and John Anthony, he's been waiting on his technology to come in, his computer. He was building a channel, all that. You're doing it from your smartphone. I haven't talked to him about, hey man, why don't you just do it from your smartphone? If you guys want to debate bad enough, you'll make it happen, and we'll make it happen on the show, and we'll get it. It'll be more of a debate environment. I mean, I really do have, as you can imagine from how the last half of this show went, I've got a lot of points that I try to hold back because I feel like I'm the host and I didn't invite you here to attack you. I invited you here so my chat could attack you.
and I will say this, if you do want, I can go. How many videos do you have in that series? Because I've seen I think it's called The Moral Monster God or God of Abraham.
The Evil God Monster of Abraham. There are 11 episodes that are done, and each one's like 5 to 12 minutes long. They're not great long kind of deals. Yeah, because the chapters of the Bible are really short. Yeah. And
so what I can do.
Real quick, this is something I point out in the beginning of the video. Because people will often say, well, you're not understanding it because you're not reading it in ancient Hebrew, or you're not. Remember, you and I kind of covered that. So in the beginning of the video, I said I'm using the NIV version. It's good enough to teach millions of Christians. It's good enough for me. If
it's the worst one,
but according to whom, right? But I did say
most scholars,
right? I did say, well. Yeah. It's sort of like going, which version of Spider-Man is the best version of Spider? Well, the one I can read, the one but also, like I say, if they're teaching millions of Christians, it should be good enough for me. And there again, it brings us back to, listen, if it's a secret code and you got to go learn the ancient Hebrew, understand it, it's trash to billions of people who study it.
My dislike of the NIV is just really how Protestant reformed it is, and not necessarily with issues about this.
Right,
it's more about like, it's more that they're very Protestant reformed-y. It's not much to do with like atheism versus theism. So yeah. No, but yeah, what I can do if you want, actually with my YouTube channel, Barely Protestant, what I can do is I can do response videos to those, and actually where I can sit down and like study the actual claims that are being made in your videos and talk and respond to them.
You know, you're welcome to do that. I figured somebody was going to do it eventually. Some Christian was going to go down, but I've experienced, and this is what I fear will have happen, and I could be wrong. I'm going to go into the second part of it. You're going to go to chapter 3 where I talk about Cain and Abel, and you're going to go, oh no, that's not really what that means. That's metaphorically speaking that Cain loved puppies, and you know, you're going to apologize away all the things that are really, it really says that right there. You can apologize it away all you want. I mean, you're welcome to, but that's what I fear will happen. It'll be, you know, like whenever Noah, the first thing Noah does, what's the first thing Noah does when he gets off the boat? He kills animals. They don't eat animals at that point of the story. So he murders them solely so God can smell burning flesh. Where is that good in your mind? Where is that a good example?
These are
the
parts where
all-knowing God.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. You're going to go, oh, well, God doesn't really like the smell of burning flesh. That's a metaphor for, you know?
Okay.
So you're welcome to.
So the question of sacrifice. So I would agree with your problem with that sort of critique of like, oh, it's just metaphor. So my hope and desire is to never just sort of throw things away as like, oh, that's metaphor. So the point is it metaphor actually, or is it, you know, like you're using metaphor as a sort of catch-all for like allegory, hyperbole.
Yes. Thank you.
So
thank you.
Like they're not all the same thing.
We were saving time with the term metaphor.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just for the audience to understand.
Yes.
So the thing is, you have to look at what actual history says about it. Not like what is my first thought when I come to read these passages.
Yeah.
So I can't just say, oh, well, that's metaphor because I don't like it. No, I have to say, okay, it's metaphor because we see this in history at that time, and we have these other documents from that time showing and indicating that this is metaphor.
Right. So
that's the approach I would take.
Yeah.
Rather than just saying, oh, I don't like it, so therefore it's metaphor.
Of course.
That would be a bad way.
That would be bad. I get that. But in examples like that, where it specifically says X did Y because of Z, you know, like I was talking Cain and Abel. Cain did this because of this. And it says specifically, you know, and things like there's other things in there. What about Eve? Did Eve teach us anything other than sin? Did she teach us anything? There was nothing about Eve. Nothing. It's just
Eve teaches us that like, what are you talking about when you say Eve doesn't teach us anything?
Eve is a character in the Bible. She's the very first woman in the Bible described, and she literally does nothing. Nothing. She shows up, she eats the apple, she gets cursed, done. No lessons there from Eve. Fruit. Yeah, you know what I mean. Yeah. Of course, it's not a snake, right? It's a serpent. Gotcha. Before we get there.
Oh, it's not even that. It's not even that.
I'm sorry?
It's not even necessarily that. It's just called a flaming one.
I've never heard that. Never heard. Have I heard that?
It's often translated to serpent.
Because
it's often translated into serpent.
I can see how those could be confused.
Yeah, it actually could be something like a seraph or something. Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting.
The question of, quote, who Satan is a really interesting one, because we tend to have this idea that there's this guy with horns on his head named Satan, named Lucifer.
Yeah.
And he was the serpent, and then he's just this guy that's all throughout. He's in Job and all that sort of stuff. There are reasons to believe that that's not exactly how it all works out.
See, when you say we believe that this guy was all, I assumed you just meant you Christians, because us on this side, no. Most of us, I don't think anybody here believes the serpent is Satan, is Lucifer. We've been through all
within
that.
The narrative.
Yeah, exactly,
like,
right.
When I say we, I'm saying we believe within the narrative, like whether you're Christian or non-Christian, is what I'm saying.
Yes. Well, see, as a non-Christian, I don't believe that. I don't believe the serpent is Lucifer.
Yeah.
Yeah, no. I get you though. I understand. I'm just saying
even
that
within the
I don't.
narrative.
Yes, within the narrative, it
Even
does.
within the narrative. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, of course, obviously.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would disagree. I don't think that actually Lucifer and Satan are the same person. But that's a whole other can of worms.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. If I can real quick say one
Yeah.
quick thing about the whole studying and everything, I think the point of this of a requirement of this whole thing being actually a difficult building is because of two things. So the first one is American Christianity comes from Puritanism, and Puritanism is this idea that basically, roughly, everything that's not explicitly in the Bible we just throw out. So we take out all the context, we take out all of the history and all that sort of stuff, and we just look at the Bible. So because of Puritanism's grounding within the American culture, that becomes the mindset that people have. And it is, I think, an incredibly wrong mindset. I think it is actually incredibly detrimental. You don't take a thing that is written outside of its context and interpret it. You have to read it within its context. Now, the second thing is so we have to build up because of that. Now, the second thing is that when it comes to actually studying and working these things out, part of that is actually a sanctifying process. What that means is that in exercise, you have to actually do tough things. You have to lift weights, all that sort of stuff. Otherwise, you're not going to actually grow and form into more of what you want to be. So likewise, intellectually, we have to exercise. So embedded within the Christian framework is this push for mental, intellectual exercise. And so the point is that God just doesn't throw a Bible from you in the sky and just say, okay, read it, and the first interpretation that comes to your mind is true. No, we actually have to work these things out, and there are these struggles and problems and all that sort of stuff. So yeah.
I get you. Anyway, long stress from the conversation. Did I say I was going to do a debate? Well, what I've been threatening to do is host debates between certain people. I just haven't been able to make it happen yet. Partly on my fault, partly on scheduling, partly on other things. But really, Deacon James and John Anthony want to do a debate. I'd like to have. I mean, you kind of see. This is pretty much what I would do. I'd go, well, what about this? And what about this? And from my view, it's all, well, I'm going to try to nail you down to this point, nail you down to this point, and watch the apologists squirm around why these aren't real good points. You know, back again, when we talk about Lot and his daughters and God blessing Lot and his daughters with children who went on to be the fathers of nations, this is a blessing incest, blessing elder rape, if you want. How do you justify these things? And then we kind of go on to, well, I justify it because God is love, is peace. And now we're over here talking about something else. It never really addressing the actual question of how can you apologize away those things. You know, we start out with Lot or Abram being incestuous, from a family of incestuous people. He goes down to Pharaoh in Egypt and gives his wife to Pharaoh. Pharaoh gives her back and says, you gave me this woman and she gave me a disease. Abram and Sarai gave the Pharaoh a sexually transmitted disease. That's what it says in the Bible. Got him back 30 years later. He's cutting off the end of his dick and making the first covenant. That sounds like syphilis eating the brain. Really. I mean, Al Capone walked out of his cell with his hat on thinking he was going home because his brain was gone from syphilis he'd gotten from prostitutes back in the, I mean, it says it right there in the book. Of course, the way the Christian apologists would be, well, it was a metaphor that it was an allegory. It was this, they didn't really go into the thing. I mean, how old was Abram when he went into Egypt? He was in his 60s or 70s. How old was Sarai when she went with him? If she wasn't in her 60s, 50s, 60s, or 70s, and he was, of course, we already know they really liked the young girls back in the day, but she was his sister and, younger than he. They go to Egypt. The Pharaoh finds her so beautiful that he has to have her. I mean, this is like a 50-year-old woman who's lived a hard desert life. Did any of this not make sense? Does any of this go,
So I
don't know if I believe this or not.
No. So I will ask, what scholarly works did you use for?
For which part?
So for any of this. Did you just use the Bible and say like, okay, I'm going to read it, and what are my thoughts on it? Because when you talk about things like, oh, well, that sounds like syphilis or that sort of stuff.
Oh, that's my own thing. Yeah, I never said. Yeah.
So my problem is like that's not how history is done. And that's not how
hey,
science
we're
is.
using no. I'm actually, that's the whole purpose of the deal. It's your Bible. Your Bible says this is what happened. And then to go, oh, well, you didn't read the right translation, or it's not the real history.
No, I didn't say
How is that not the real history? I mean, you can go, it's Genesis chapter 12. Genesis chapter 12, Abram takes Sarai to Egypt. The Pharaoh says, you gave me her. She's your wife, not your sister. And she gave my family a disease.
Okay. So my point is this, though. When it comes to these passages, I think it's best to actually look at what the scholarly work is. And I take scholarly work on all sides. I don't just go, oh, well, here are the people who actually.
So what does the scholarly work say on that? Or maybe you should get back with me on that one after you look into what the scholarly work.
I'll have to get back on that specific one. I have to get specifically back on that one.
Obviously.
Because that was just,
I mean, because literally in the Bible, chapter 12 is when he does that.
Yeah.
And then chapter 20, he does it again. He tries to give her away again in chapter 20.
Yeah.
But this time I think he's Abraham at that point. Abraham at that point.
Yeah, he goes from Abram to Abraham. Yeah. He gets a renaming. Yeah. So my thing on those sorts of things, those have never been problem passages to me, because those are never sort of shown as like, hey, Abraham is doing the right thing here. Like the ones that would always be a problem for me are the things like God allegedly commanding, the slaughtering of children and all that sort of stuff. Like those are the problem passages for me. It was never like, oh, Abraham did a bad thing. Well, yeah, people do bad things.
What is the reward from God in the Old Testament for being a good person or being godly? What's the reward in the Old Testament? It's not heaven. We don't talk about heaven until the New Testament.
Oh, yeah.
So it's to live
the resurrection is not even talked about until
So it's to live a long life. They lived like 900 years or something, to live a long life and to have many children and to have children who are the fathers of nations. Those are the rewards of the Old Testament.
Yeah, and then there's repentance that comes out of it too, and it's not just the fathers of nations, but the fathers of nations that are good.
Right,
it's not
but
just there's
even
a distinction.
Even after all the bad things Abram did, in the end, he was rewarded.
After repentance, yes.
I don't see him repent. Well, unless you consider cutting our. No, so the original. The repentance I'm thinking you're talking about would be the first covenant, whenever he went ahead and did the circumcision, and that was the first covenant between him and his people.
That'd be part of it, yeah.
Okay. So that's what I'm talking about. That was 30 years after he left Egypt, knowingly having a it's a disease. Him and his wife had a disease. Or his wife had a disease, gave it to Pharaoh. They said that in the book. His own scribes wrote that down. Now,
well, as I recall, it was
30 years later, he's starting to talk to the Lord. He decides to have a covenant and cut off the end of his penis, which is what they did in Egypt. Circumcision comes from Egypt. And then he does the first covenant with the Lord. So have you ever seen those 80s movies where like the detective is sneaking up and there's a Satan worshipers over there, and he looks like through a basement window and there's these Satan worshipers, and they've got this naked virgin laying on a thing, and they've got blood and they're splattering the blood, and there's an altar and all that. Okay, so let's talk about the first covenant with God. So Abram, this wonderful guy, he goes and he builds 12 little stone altars, and then they bring out the cows and they cut the throats of the cows and they catch the blood of the cows in the bowls, and they sprinkle the blood on the altars, and then they turn and sprinkle the blood on the worshipers while they say, "Holy, holy is the Lord, holy, holy is the Lord." Is that not a sign right out of an 80s movie about Satan worship? Is that not disgusting? Is that not, that is Abraham of the Abrahamic religions, the padre, the father of Christianity, Abrahamic religions, and Judaism.
Yeah.
That doesn't,
because 80s movies came thousands of years after the writing of the Old Testament.
Okay. But I'm reading to you the Old Testament now. That's what I'm talking about. To me, it looks like
my
that.
Point,
Okay.
Yeah. And so the question of sacrifice itself is a very deep anthropological one. Now with the
but let's not move away from the point, though. Let's not move away from the point. Don't justify killing animals by talking about how God blah 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 blah. Let's talk about Abram sprinkling blood all over the place, including a bunch of people. Can you see that in your mind? Does that work? Is that right in your head?
Well, if I understand it within its own context, then it makes sense.
Yeah, according to my understanding is God, Abram goes along, he's going along, talks to God. God decides they want to make a covenant, and then they bring out the young bulls and the young men catch the blood.
So the reason for the whole importance of the blood thing is to show the actual importance of life.
It's a blood cult.
Sacrifice. Yeah, it's a blood cult. Yeah. So.
And Jesus is the ultimate blood sacrifice, by the way. So Christianity is a blood cult.
Yes.
Okay. Well, as long as we're here on that, we can move on. I like these. Fair enough.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like blood is essential within the Christian faith, which is why when I received the sacrament, I actually genuinely believe it is the body and blood of Christ under the forms of bread and wine. So yeah.
The cognitive dissonance is strong with this one. It's a Star Wars thing.
No. I will say this. Yeah, there are times where I'm like, oh, this is a crazy belief. Yeah, I'm never going to deny that. However, I believe it. And when I don't believe it, I make sure that I act like I believe it, because action is just as important as belief, I would say.
Interesting.
And so I think it's an important and central aspect of my faith. Yeah.
Yep. All right. You know what, man? I have held you a long time. Thank you for coming on the show. It's been a lot of fun.
Well,
I appreciate you letting me take the gloves off. Normally as a host, I feel really constrained and I try not to be too contrary with my guests, but my people love it. They just love it when I start flailing my hands and sweating. I'm sweating. Hey, do you remember that show from like Saturday Night Live back in the 80s? This woman go, superstar.
Yeah. I mean, I was born in the late 80s, so like I don't remember it as an 80s kid, but yeah.
You've heard since. Yeah, gotcha.
Yeah, I've heard since. Yeah, so I've appreciated it. Like the only thing for me is like I would have prepared if I thought I was going to get into a debate, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I'm just going based off of like my generic studies in the past, literally like 10 years. Yeah. I've been studying this sort of stuff. In the Old Testament stuff was much more a focus of mine way back in the early, when I was agnostic.
Yeah. Yeah, the Old Testament, it's interesting. I'm going through it now, as you know, and you can check out the videos. Like I said, they're really short, and you can do other things if you want. I don't mind. We can actually do that. We can argue back and forth, and I'll make a contrary video. I don't care. But with the videos. In my experience with the Old Testament, I have a very, very difficult time. Thank you, Sammy Jenkins. I have a very difficult time rectifying the monster-like nature of the God of the Old Testament as it's written with the fuzzy-wuzzy, lovey-dovey notion of Jesus Christ, forgive everybody, love everybody.
Oh, I don't think Jesus is a fuzzy-wuzzy, lovey-dovey. That might be another difference.
That's true. But
Jesus is not. Yeah, Jesus is a hard guy.
He
has some things to say.
In my experience, I'm used to bumping up against evangelicals, and the more wishy-washy Christian, they really move their goalposts a lot about who Jesus is and what he is. So I'm used to dealing with him. They're like, Jesus is love and he forgives you and you don't have to be a Christian. He's going to forgive you and all this other stuff. I'm like, wait a second. That doesn't sound like, no. Another thing about Jesus is he was a Jew. Why aren't you a Jew?
Because I didn't grow up as a Jew.
Well, if that's how Jesus did things, Jesus did Passover. Did he not do Passover? We have Leonardo da Vinci did a painting in the 1600s that shows Jesus at a table, so that must mean it's true.
No, so the whole point of Christianity is actually the inclusion of Gentiles into the family of God. So Jews were initially the people who were part of the family of God, and so what happens is with Christianity, what happens is that through Christ, Gentiles are actually invited in. So as a Gentile, you can be part of the family of God, which is the great sort of joy of the understanding of the Christian faith. And so that means that Jews can be part of the family of God and Gentiles. Both are united in Christ. So.
That's interesting. That's an interesting view, actually. John Anthony points out, and he's the one you're going to debate someday if we can make that happen. He'll be on the show tomorrow.
Cool. I'll listen in, definitely.
Awesome. Yeah. I may even send you a link if y'all want to just have a conversation during the thing.
Sure.
I was raised Catholic. No one cared about whether you felt good about anything. That's what he said. That's true. I've heard that about Catholicism. That's a good one, John Anthony. Yeah. We talked about, I did top 10 videos, and I may start doing top 10 videos again because I got some of my best views on the top 10 videos. I did a top 10 video on, artifacts, Christian artifacts. What do you call them?
Okay.
Relics. And
Relics,
I just discovered things like, Jesus was a Jew, and therefore as a baby, he was circumcised. And there's a church out there that claims to have the actual dick flesh of Jesus.
That's
crazy.
Woman, there's a saint in the church around the time of the Reformation who claimed that Jesus married her and that the ring was his circumcised flesh that she got.
Wowzer. I hadn't heard that.
I think that's Saint Catherine of Siena, or that's Saint Teresa.
Interesting. I hadn't heard that. Yeah, I did the thing, and I was so blown away. The reason why I did the video was because they did a relic. There was a piece of relic. All right, brother, from the actual manger where Jesus Christ was born. Can you imagine, like, today, if you went to like an old farmhouse, or somewhere, just the odds of going back later and finding that actual piece of that manger, the real actual. And some of them even have relics where it's little pieces of hay that they claim are the actual hay that Jesus Christ was born in. And that's what got me into it. I didn't think nothing about it. And I found out that the crown of thorns. Well, did you know there's about 6 of them?
Oh yeah.
Throughout the Catholic churches, in various places. One's in Spain and one's over here.
Like the bread and the loaves and fishes, it just multiplies.
It just multiplies. So I want to know how many. They call it the bris. Is that right? The bris of Jesus, the dick flesh. I think that's what it's called, bris. The flesh left over. I wonder how many of those there are.
Well, that one saint, either Catherine or Teresa, I can't remember which one. She has on her ring finger, so yeah, that's one.
Yeah. That's at least one. Yeah, so those are the things I learned. I thought that was a lot of Jesus dick flesh thing. You guys, I couldn't help myself. It's like a culture thing. I have no culture. That's why. You know what, man? I tell you, I'm gonna go do that voodoo that I do so well. I appreciate you for stopping by, and again, we all knew your views were going to be different, so I appreciate you showing up and dealing with this. It's like, man, if I was to get on a Christian show, if you have a Christian show with a bunch of followers and you'd like to have me on it, would I have a similar experience?
Maybe
I should find out.
I would. Yeah, I actually. So once I'm done with my finals, which is May 11th, because I have about like 6, 7, 8 papers I got to do. Once I'm done with my finals, I'll actually be re-going into my whole YouTube thing, and actually I have a podcast that I'm wanting to start as well. I'd love to have you on. I'd love to have like this sort of discussion.
Cool.
Just a friendly chat.
Yeah. Well, what I mean is kind of, and I would love that, by the way. That'd be fun. But, there's bound to be some Christian channels out there that kind of do what we do. And I wonder if, what I was trying to say was, if I go beyond one of equal size to mine, I would like to think that the viewers there and the people there would try to be as, it'd be a similar experience. We'd be good. It'd be fun, is what I'm saying. Matter of fact, now hopefully I'm thinking about doing it. And
hopefully my viewers would be friendly.
Hopefully they would. And, I would, because it's the tech nerd in me. I would actually have some advice about your channel. I have a couple of thoughts. I'd like to make suggestions afterwards later about, not that I'm trying to help him, but he's a content creator. You know how it is. Thank you, Brainbug. Thank you everybody for showing up in the chat. Cronin, I've never seen you before. Thank you for showing up. And all of you people, you're wonderful. Brainbug, Epileptic Skeptic, John Anthony, you guys are all great. Thank you again, Deacon James, for showing up. And this was an unusual show. You're welcome. Yeah, we'll have to do it again sometime. Well, you know what we ought to do? We ought to get some conversations and debates going between you and me and you and Paul Cammish. Matter of fact, even said he'd like to debate you. So if you're into debating, if that's your bag, well, we can make that happen. All right, here we go. Thank you guys. Have a great week, and we'll see you all tomorrow.
Peace.